Good evening, and welcome to the meetings Monday, June 26, 2023. I'm called to order the meeting of the Winchton Board of Selectmen at 6:30 p.m.
And that was louder than expected. We are calling our joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee to order at 6 o'clock on June 26th.
Thank you. 6 o'clock. I said, I get 6:30 on the brain. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I will announce that this evening, Selectman Rick Ward is present via conference call. He is out of the country, so we will be doing a roll call vote for any Board of Selectmen vote. Is anyone in the audience audio or video recording? If you would just please raise your hand or otherwise indicate. And I see none. Thank you very much. Chairman Forsyth, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Chairman Labrie. Good evening, everyone. Those in the hall and those at home, thank you for attending tonight's joint meeting of the Winchton School Committee and the Winchton Board of Selectmen. The joint meeting this evening is planned to include the selection of a new committee member to take a seat that is being vacated. The seat is being vacated by Alicia Jordan, who we thank for her service. The newly selected member will begin their role on the school committee on August 1st, 2023, and will serve until the next town election in May of 2024. At that time, the new member may seek to be elected for a seat for a full term. By the application deadline of June 22nd, the school committee and the Board of Selectmen had received 8 letters of interest and/or resumes. Thank you to all of the candidates that have shown interest. We are very glad that you are interested in serving and giving back to your town. Tonight is an opportunity for the public, the Board of Selectmen, and the school committee to meet the applicants. Chair Labrie and I have prepared a couple of questions which will be asked of all applicants. The 2 questions are, please give us 1 or 2 examples of what you see the Winchton Public School District is doing right, and tell us how you would strengthen and continue to grow those aspects of the district. The second question is to please give us 1 or 2 examples of what you see the district is doing wrong or areas needing improvement, and tell us how you would address those issues. Members of the boards, of course, may ask clarifying questions as needed. I will ask all Board of Selectmen members and school committee members to act with brevity tonight. We do have 8 candidates to get through, so that could take a long time, but of course we want to make sure we meet them all thoroughly. Each applicant was notified of this evening's meeting and had the opportunity to attend or not attend. Attendance was not necessary. To be as fair as possible, Chair Labrie will be picking names out of a bowl to determine the order of which the applicants will be invited to answer questions. If an applicant is not present at the time their name is pulled, we will move on to the next applicant. Any applicant who is not present at the time that their name is called will not be invited back up to answer questions after their name is called. So this will be based on the luck of the draw. At the end of the question period, all remaining members of the school committee, which does not include Ms. Jordan because of her resignation, and all members of the Board of Selectmen will be invited to nominate 1 or more applicants to become candidates to be voted upon. An applicant does not need to be present to be nominated. At the end of the nomination period, nominations will be closed and a discussion of the nominated candidates will be invited by all members of both boards. At the end of the discussion period, each remaining member of the school committee, which again does not include Ms. Jordan, and all members of the Board of Selectmen will be invited to vote by roll call vote, as Chair Labrie just mentioned. A candidate does not need to be present to be voted for. A candidate can successfully be appointed with a majority of the votes cast. Multiple votes may be necessary to establish a majority. And once a candidate has been selected, the joint meeting of the 2 boards will conclude. And I believe that the Board of Selectmen intends to continue with their regularly scheduled meeting. With that said, are there any questions from any members of the Board of Selectmen or the school committee? If not, I say we go ahead and get started and pull that first name. Before we do, I will mention to all the members of the boards that you have received all of the applicants' materials either electronically or you've got some in your handouts in front of you. And Chair Labrie was also nice enough to prepare a note-taking document. So if you want to keep notes, that's your prerogative. Chair Labrie.
Mike Gaspar, if I'm pronouncing it correctly or incorrectly. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Mike. First question is yours, and that is, please give us one or two examples of what you see the Winchendon Public School District is doing right, and tell us how you would strengthen and continue to grow those aspects of the district.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So some of the schools are coming out of DESE oversight. I believe that's a huge success for the district. I believe Mr. King's leading that successfully, and I would do whatever support he needs to continue that and hopefully get the middle school out of DESE oversight and continue giving students the opportunities that they deserve. Another good thing I really like is the dual enrollment program at the high school. I think it gives students a huge leg up on college. They enter college already having credits under their belt. It's not only a financial benefit to them, but it just overall gives them a better position going into college.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Second question, please give us one or two examples of what you see that the district is doing wrong or an area needing improvement, and tell us how you would address those.
All right, so from personal experience, my family's had difficulties with the special ed department. That's kind of led me into becoming a layman's expert in special education. So I kind of have some awareness of what DESE requirements are, as well as student requirements. So I think I could be helpful in implementing policies and procedures that help students, administrators follow guidelines and achieve goals set out for them. Another issue that I see is it seems we have a high turnover of well-liked teachers, and I'd like to get into why that's happening. Is it teachers not wanting to stay within the district, and if that's the case, why? And any other reason. I believe that to long-term build a successful team, you need to keep people on your team that are good and well-liked and successful, and I think we need to look into why we're having that turnover.
Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Clarifying questions or questions from the boards?
Mrs. Lapointe?
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, I would kind of like to ask this of all candidates as it may apply. I realize that the impetus for some of you is because of what is happening in the district right now. So I'm interested to hear about once what the candidate sees as problems are fixed, kind of where do you stand? Like, where are you looking? Are you looking for just this appointment and then, fix what you think is wrong and then go forward? Or are you also interested in running for the 3-year term once this appointment is done? And I would ask that of everybody.
Yep, fair question, thank you.
I think I was motivated by what I saw as issues. But I have 2 students in the district, one going into 7th grade, one going into 9th grade. So I'm definitely in it for the long haul. I wouldn't just be looking to change what I see as an issue. And again, I don't know if everybody received my letter. I hold no bias based off what's happened. I'm just looking to fix things, and that's all aspects of things. So not just special education, not just teacher turnover. I want the best for my kids, and my kids go to school in town, and I'd like them to get the best education they can. And if I can be part of that, I'd love to be, and I think I could benefit my children by being on the school committee.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair,
Yes.
like Ms. Lapointe, I would like to ask this of all the candidates. I think that often people see us at our meetings and think that We spend time at our meetings and maybe a little time before preparing for the meetings, but I would like to know, what type of time commitment, are you able to put in the time commitment, and are you aware that there may be a lot more involved in taking this position even as a temporary, and because this is geared towards everybody, even if this were to be only a temporary seat for all the candidates, are you aware that sometimes you may be stopped on the street or have to deal with phone calls or Facebook messages and everything else?
Absolutely. So I'm pretty fortunate. My job that pays the bills is pretty flexible. I'm a regional manager for an electrical wholesale company, so I'm at the top. So I have the time to commit to this. I'd love to be part of subcommittees. I have the time for that. I think, approachable, easy to talk to. So I hope that people would come to me, and I know that that doesn't mean I can solve every problem or I can discuss everything that's going on. I understand the legal implications of that, but I'd like to be aware of how people are feeling so I can address it. And I certainly have the time, and it would be a commitment, and I'm readily willing to undertake.
Thank you.
I see nothing further from this end.
Very good. Mr. Gaspar, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mike Barbaro.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, Mike.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Same two questions to begin with, and probably the latter two that you heard.
Yeah.
The first one is, please give us one or two examples of what you see the Winchendon Public Schools doing right, and tell us how you would strengthen and continue to grow those aspects of the district.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that I was part of the team that helped bring the school district out from underperforming and watching that continue success. There's more than one thing that have gone right, and I think you need to point that out. Our early literacy program that the superintendent has been pushing the last couple of years, as you watched at the last couple of school committee meetings, the success is coming through. You see the kids learning how to read and write, and I think that is going to be big-time benefits for the district going forward, because the kids, there's been a huge emphasis on getting them to read and write at an earlier age. That's a huge success for the district going forward, because the more the kids are prepared and they move forward, the better off they're going to do. All the statistics show that the younger kids, when you give them the right tools to learn, carry that all the way through. So that's huge. That's huge for the district moving forward. We have, over the last couple of years, we've done no cost for sports. There's been no cost for food through all the grants and whatnot, but those, again, help this community move forward. We're a community that has food problems, food insecurities. These are things that we're bringing to the community through the schools that go unnoticed. So I think those are really important issues that you need to bring up, the positives.
Great. Thank you very much. Second question to you. Please give us one or two examples of what you see the district is doing wrong or areas needing improvement, and tell us how you would address those issues.
Well, I've been attending the meetings for the last many months. Obviously, the special ed department needs some work, whether it's the role of the superintendent, but the school committee does play a role in the hiring and maintaining of that position. And, there has been a huge outcry about the special ed department, lack of communication, lack of timelines. These need to be corrected. These are laws. These are not something we willy-nilly do. They need to be done accurately and on time. And if the person that's there can't do the job, we need to put someone in there that can do the job. I'd like to see that position separated from Director of Pupil Services, because special ed is special ed, and that needs to be on its own. So I think that to me is really important, that be left to do its job and not tied up with other things. The other thing I see right now is a lack of morale in some of the schools. Some of the teachers are leaving, some of the other staff is upset. We need to rebuild morale again. We have, some turnover in principals. Again, this was one of the things that the state always identified as Winchendon as having a problem with. We need to maintain our administrators. Those are key issues to keep driving the success of the school forward. I think you have to look at it from a global picture. We are doing well, but there are things that we need to repair. And we need to have better communication with the parents in certain areas. Special education absolutely has to be addressed with the parents. I've sat here and watched many meetings, and unfortunately, when you sit on that side of the table, you can't respond that evening, but you do send out emails. You should send out emails, you should respond, and I'm sure you have to some degree. But there's only a limited role that the school committee can play. It's not that you can force issues, you can make recommendations, you can make things, but there's policies in place that limit the school committee's ability to do things, and I think sometimes the general public doesn't understand that, and it makes it very hard for people to grasp that.
Thank you.
If I may, the two questions that were asked that we ask all candidates, is your interest in this position just for the interim until next May, or would you be considering pursuing this beyond
Considering
the
I just
election?
ran, I would like to continue. My passion for the school department has been well known. I mean, I live and breathe for the schools. I've always had the passion for the school department. Why? I have had two children that have gone through the schools, and one of them's been very successful in going to college, and now is on her third master's. So I think, to watch what our children do in the school district, the success they have, it always drives me. And to see the school district survive and flourish makes me proud to be a member of this community, and also a member of the school committee, if so appointed.
Thank you, and you are aware of the time commitment that is required for a school committee member, for the record.
Yes,
Thank
for
you.
the record. Yes, it is not I like to tell you, it's not a 2 to 3 hour commitment. It can range anywhere from 20 to 40 hours, depending upon what you put into it, between subcommittees, negotiations, going down the Cape for the week, those couple of days, and all the meetings you take in, just like we did in Boston. The time commitment I have no problem making. I always made the time off. I've always gone to MASC. I think it's important to go there to learn and to see what's out there and to communicate with other school committee members, because we're not inventing the wheel. We're just part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any clarifying questions from the Board of Selectmen? No?
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Mike, you've been in this position before, and you're aware of the separation of responsibilities between school committee and the superintendent. What role, if any, do you feel the school committee does or should play when it comes to the retention of staff?
I think by law, you have no. By policy, by law, we have no right. The only person you have two people you are three people you're directly in charge of. You have the superintendent, you have the business manager based on the recommendation, and you have the special ed director. When you have an issue where you think you can have a conversation with the superintendent, ask him why might this not be happening, or why is this happening? You could say, I might agree with you on this position, but you can strongly disagree with his position. Doesn't mean that at the end of the day, he has to listen to you. Your role is basically policy and finance. It's in the hand of the superintendent, and you hope the superintendent makes the right decision. Sometimes you can help guide him and say, hey, I think X, Y, and Z is a good thing. But, you know, our role, as your role, as our role, or anybody's role, is limited. And, you know, I think sometimes that's not carried over to the general public because they think they can just go in and say, I want you to do X. It doesn't work that way. And when you go to MASC and you do chart the course, they will lay out what you can do and what you can't do. And that's a highly regarded 8-hour program that all new school committee members need to take.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes?
just to ask a clarifying question off of that. But wouldn't you agree that in regards to that, the superintendent should be answering those questions when they're asked?
The superintendent, you're his boss.
Right.
So if you ask a question, I would expect an answer. It might not be the answer I want to hear or you want to hear, but I would expect an answer. Communication between the superintendent and the school committee is key. I will tell you that when I was chair, we were asked by MASC to speak about superintendent-school committee relationships because our relationship was noted. When I was chair, we were noted as one of the highest functioning school committees in the state and asked to speak about it. So you have to have good communication with your superintendent, and you earn the respect both ways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Mike Gaynor.
Hello, Mike.
Hello, good evening, joint committees. It's so nice to meet you all.
Nice to have you. Same questions. Please give us 1 or 2 examples of what you see Winchendon Public School District is doing right, and tell us how you would strengthen and continue to grow those aspects of the district.
Okay, under the leadership of Mr. King, I believe that this district has, went ahead and appointed excellent administrative leadership, including Dr. Jonathan Landman. Dr. Landman, as you know, was hired to be like a turnaround agent, a change agent for this district. And, he's the director of, or assistant superintendent of curriculum planning and instruction, I believe. So those are the areas that we need to work on, right? How to get a standards-based curriculum that's rigorous, challenging for our students, but prepares them for their MCAS testing and for, college and career readiness. I think that's the strength of this district, is that it's looking outwards by recruiting people such as Dr. Landman. I mean, he is a consultant for Research for Better Teaching, and those are the strategies and interventions that should be used in school districts and the schools. So I think that's very important. I think that's key, that, that's a strength. So looking outward and getting both academics but well-experienced turnaround agents like Dr. Landman.
Very good, thank you. Please give us 1 or 2 examples of what you see that the district is doing wrong or any areas needing improvement, and please tell us how you would address those issues.
Okay, Mr. Chair. Sorry, that's better, thank you. So I think one thing, just to reiterate what the 2 previous candidates said, definitely special education is important. Myself, I've been a special educator now for 5 years, but also a teacher for 10 years. So I realize the importance of providing strong special education services for our students, where we're promoting, equity, inclusion, and then the social emotional learning piece. The bottom line, folks, is that if our students don't feel safe, they can't be teaching and learning, right? So we need to keep our students safe. We need to build relationships with them. We need to understand where they're coming from, that social emotional piece, and, promote equity and inclusion. It's so important that our students feel like they're valued, that they're important, that, because it's all about them. The bottom line is providing a rigorous-based education that will lead to strong outcomes for each of our students. So I think this is something that's really important. Like I said, just making sure they all feel included and that there's that equity piece, so.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will ask, what is your intention, should you be appointed to this position? Are you looking to just fill until next May, or would you consider putting your hat in the ring for an election next May?
Yes, no, actually, I would want to do this appointment for as long as, humanly possible, right? Consider running for, elective school committee board member seat after the temporary appointment. So, I'm new to the community. We've only been here for a little over a year now. October of 2021, we moved in. But I have a 2-year-old son who will be joining preschool next year, so I care greatly about him and his education. I want the best for him, obviously. And I think I have a lot to bring to this position. I do have an MBA, Master of Business Administration from the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a Master of Public Administration from the University of Pittsburgh, a Master of Education from the University of Massachusetts Boston, and my undergraduate work was at Boston University, political science. But I also, like I said, have 10 years of teaching experience. I'm currently a teacher in the Air Shirley Regional School District. I'm a special education inclusion teacher. I teach, in a humanities class, co-teaching, as well as in a sub-separate classroom for biology. And then also I do the Wilson reading system with an individual student. So I've worked for middle school, high school, and also elementary school as well. So I think it's really important, yes, it's important to have parents involved in a school committee. It's important to have community members and leaders as well. But you really need to have teachers, right? There should be teachers on this committee, because who knows best about teaching than teachers? And the bottom line is, you need to recruit the best teacher candidates and teachers possible in your schools, because that's what's going to allow outcomes for your students, is depending on the faculty and the staff that you appoint and have.
So I take it that's a yes.
So it's a yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. And as Mrs. Cass McBride pointed out, there are certain times where it's a lot more than just sitting in front of the camera and having the meetings. There is a considerable time commitment, and you're prepared to make that commitment.
Yes, I am, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, committee.
Any questions, comments from the board? None from this end of the table, Chairman Forsythe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kevin Nelson. Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, Mr. Nelson. A couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. I bet you know what they are.
I've heard a couple.
Please give us one or two examples of what you see the Winchendon Public School District is doing right, and tell us how you would strengthen and continue to grow those aspects of our district.
Well, certainly, and Mr. Barbaro highlighted these, the free activities that Winchendon offers is certainly a plus. The free meals, especially where that is an issue for this town. In terms of other things educationally, I can say I have this past year, had a daughter in kindergarten at Memorial, a son in 4th grade at Toytown Elementary, and a daughter in 7th grade at Murdoch Middle. So I've kind of had a little feel of all the schools. And while there's a second part to this that goes with your second question, the fact that they are learning the material for the most part and have been able to maintain or improve grades certainly is a reflection on at least a good portion of the teaching. So that's certainly a plus. In terms of how I would help in any of these regards, as you saw from my resume, I have no experience in teaching. or education. I'm a horticulturist. I'm a longtime parent. I was a single father for a little bit for my daughter, who's now 21 years old. So I'm coming at it from a parent perspective. Certainly, there's that 8-hour course. As most of you know, I did run for this position last year, and things were not meant to be at that time. So going through that 8-hour course and learning what we can do and what we cannot do, and how we assist the superintendent and other folks in those realms, I'm not very familiar with. So I've got some catching up to do. I am a fast learner. I did hear the second question, so you don't need to repeat it. I will tell you, 2 of those children that are in the schools right now are on the autism spectrum, so they do get special ed services. That has been a big challenge. As I am at work for most of the day, it has been my wife that has been dealing with those challenges, and I know communication has certainly been the greatest issue raised in terms of special education. My understanding through my children and their friends is we still have a little bit of a bullying problem. I know that as children, you know, sticks and stones, some things are not as serious as some people might envision, where other times they are. And I know we recently went through a situation where a staff member that my daughter had reported bullying to went to the other child's parent and said, well, she's just exaggerating. I don't think it's a big deal. Well, my wife and this child's mother had a conversation, and you can imagine after that point, my wife had a conversation with the teacher, who was like a deer in the headlights. So, in terms of problems within our district, obviously there's the teacher turnover issue. What would I do about that? Well, I would want to have those conversations with the superintendent and the rest of the committee as to why that is occurring. Can't offer solutions unless you get to the heart of the problem. But in terms of bullying and communication with certain teachers, I see that as an issue that at least needs exploration. In terms of whether I would choose to pursue a full term, a lot can happen in 9 months. Anybody who's a parent knows that for a fact. But my feeling at this point is I would need to receive a lot of support from the community to tell me that that's a worthwhile run for me. A lot of folks, or at least so I was told, didn't know who I was when I ran last time and regretted not voting. Well, now they know, and if appointed to this position, they'll know more. So if at that time the support is there, then by all means, I would consider it. I'm here tonight because some members of the community encouraged me to do so, and had conversations with my wife about maybe he should do it. And having been through everything I went through last year for this position, I said, the need is there. I will put myself forward. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. In terms of the time commitment, I can tell you that I had a lengthy conversation. Dr. Forsyth was very gracious with his time when I was running last year. And I asked him all the questions, you know, can I do this? I mean, this is my work schedule. And I feel that his response was encouraging and worthwhile that, yes, this is something based on what you're telling me you could do. I am in a salary position. I work in Sudbury. It is 50 miles away. A lot of times I'm working Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturdays. I know there's a commitment for meetings. I know there's also other commitments that have to happen during the day, a couple hours, negotiations, special meetings, subcommittees. My employer is aware that I am seeking this appointment, and that would be something that I would be able to take on if necessary.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions from the Board of Selectmen?
Questions from the school committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Adam LeBlanc.
Evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, Adam.
How you doing?
Please give us one or two examples of what you see the Winchendon Public Schools district is doing right, and tell us how you would strengthen and continue to grow those aspects of the district.
What we're doing right, it's kind of hard not to caveat off of what people have already said. I believe that the last presentation with the Toytown Elementary principal and teachers coming up with their analysis on how their students is doing, it's progressively getting better. I think that is excellent. I think we should need to do it. And another thing that's right is we have we have a majority of teachers that want to be here, that want to teach, that have the enthusiasm and the drive to teach, and I think that's what is needed. That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Please give us one or two examples of what you see the district is doing wrong or areas needing improvement, and tell us how you would address those issues.
Not to beat a dead horse, but I believe the SPED department and all of the SPED needs to be looked at and revamped. And I believe that the rush of trying to figure out this turnover of comings and goings, it needs to have a more methodical aspect at it, with the intentions of trying to fill positions quickly. Sometimes that does not work out, as we all know. You can only put lipstick on a pig for so long before you call it a pig still. So if we take our time and look at the situation, see what we have for qualified candidates instead of going for the lowest offer, and then for those ones that are not considering, make it a lucrative offer for them. Make them come here. I mean, we don't have a lot of lucrative offers. I do not know how the contracts are set up in town, but if it's anything like any other job, once you put it on Indeed or whatever other service you use, and it's a free state account, as soon as it gets put up, it gets moved down after that day, week or so, and now what? Well, it's posted, but it's 40 pages back. You're not putting it back up for more people to see. So that's an avenue of approach. I mean, things take time to do, and if we put down a task and not a time limit, then you're just asking me to do something, but if you put a time limit on it, I guarantee you I will get it done. Any other questions?
Thank you. Would you be interested in throwing your hat in the ring
Absolutely.
for May?
Absolutely. If the people want me and they'll vote for me, I'll take it.
And the time commitment?
No problem. I've already served my country for more than enough time. I can serve my town just as much.
Thank you. Any questions from the Board of Selectmen?
Madam Chair? Oh, it's not
No.
Board of Selectmen, it's school committee, but let's jump in. Adam, at the last school committee meeting we had, you were pretty adamant, and I realize when people are exercised about something, they can entertain or use a fair amount of hyperbole, but you made it sound as though the district were just falling apart at the seams, and you suggested a wholesale change in administration. I'm just wondering, if you were to get this position, can you come in and can you maintain an objective assessment, or be objective in the assessment of the people that you're going to be coming in to work with, including the superintendent and the principals that are still here?
Honest opinion or honest facts? I look at both. I gotta look at the paperwork that's in front of me. I know that there's more that is behind the papers than what we see in the seats back here. You gotta look at the facts. They gotta be black and white. If there's something wrong, by all means, I'll be the first one to raise the tail feathers and call it what it is. If it's in the right, then you know what? I lick my wounds and call it as it is. I'm human, you're human, everybody else on the board's human. There's stuff that we don't know, that's fine. There's stuff that we're not allowed to know, that's fine. But at the end of the day, if I get on the board and I'm allowed to see, and then if my feelings are right, then by all means, I'm gonna pursue. But if my feelings are wrong, I'll be the first one to say, hey, Mr. Vine, you know, you knew about this before I did. I'm sorry. It's called being human. Difference of opinions, I think that's what we have on everybody here, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's for the kids. It's not just for my opinion, his opinion, her opinion. It's the children's future is what we're looking for, so.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Other questions from the school committee? Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anthony Findley.
Mr. Findley. Same questions. I'll read them or stop me if
Go ahead and read them.
Please give us one or two examples of what you see Winchendon Public School District is doing right, and tell us how you would strengthen and continue to grow those aspects of the district.
So I went through the school same time as, well, some of the people in the audience. I had children that have graduated from the school, as well as I currently have kids that are in the school. I feel one of the strengths in the school, being a small school, is the classroom size and the teacher's dedication to the students. The ability to become one-on-one with the student, and have a vested interest, and to continue to grow as the student graduates, and, well, not graduates, but levels up as they come through the system. I wouldn't be who I am today without the vested interest of the small classroom size, as well as the teachers that have been at that school. So they're doing a really good job with keeping teachers there. It is a small community. The pay isn't the best when compared to other school districts. It's that simple. I have a lot of friends that teach at other schools, as well as that teach at Murdoch, and I know that it's a considerable pay gap. But the teacher retention is good at this school. I'm there every day, Monday through Friday. I see the interaction with the teachers that stay after late with the kids day in and day out, the kids that roam the halls after the fact or during the classroom breaks in between. So there are fantastic teachers at all levels, because I had a high schooler, 2 elementaries, and 1 in pre-K last year. So I've seen the teaching aspect, and I love the teachers that are there. They're personable. They have a super vested interest. One of my kids is in special education, and she's one of the biggest advocates for my son, as well as we are. So I love, and I've always loved, because with 21 years of coaching experience there, and having a vested interest and communicating with the teaching staff that's there, they've always been open and welcome to help out. Hey, I've had teachers pull me aside and say, hey, this kid shouldn't really be practicing with you because he's doing this. And I turn around and I look at the student athlete and I say, is this true? He goes, yep, I don't want to see you until after this point. And I tell the teacher, if he doesn't show up, email me. I get an email that says, hey, you didn't show up on this day. Shows up to practice, why didn't you show up? You're not practicing today. So the fact that we have people that are willing to go that extra mile is one of the biggest strengths that we have in the school system.
Very good. Thank you. Please give us one or two examples of what you see the district is doing wrong or areas needing improvement, and tell us how you would address those issues.
So areas that need improvement, I spoke at a school committee meeting the one time that I did. I wasn't being recognized with my team, and it was really about retention. At the
I'm sorry,
top.
about?
Retention.
Retention,
Retention
thank
at
you.
the top level. born and raised, not born and raised, but I've been in this school district for, 38 years in my 41 years. I came up through the system. My kids have graduated through the system. My kids are currently in the system. My wife's in the system. I've been a track coach in the school for 21 years. I'm the longest not tenured, but I'm the longest coach that's been in that school that's currently active. And I have seen a revolving door at the administrative level. As far as fixing that, I've done my part, so has my wife, being on the superintendent search committee, being on the principal search committees, trying that aspect. It's really difficult because most people use this as a stepping stone. Thad is probably the longest person I've seen at a top level in this school in a very long time. And I think it's really fixable in that you find people internally instead of going externally. Because it is shown over the last 20 years that, hey, these people take this job and then they go elsewhere. Well, the people that really are going to be interested in this community are the people that are still serving in this community, that have had the opportunity to go someplace else. So why not pick from this and start a train for them to level up? The years that I grew up, I had people that were teachers in the school, and then they were principals in the school, and then they were superintendents in the school. And they stayed in the community. They had a vested interest in this community. Not that not being in this community doesn't mean you don't have a vested interest in this community, but hey, there's my principal, or hey, there's a superintendent. It's a small school, it's a hard school to retain, and I understand that. But one of the fixable areas to go through is find these people that have been serving 20, 30 years in here, and let's say, hey, we're gonna approach you, we want you to move up to that next level. Teachers are always getting education, they're always bettering themselves. Maybe somebody wants to take that next step.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Two questions from this end. Would you consider putting your name into the ring for election next May at the end of this temporary?
So I don't necessarily put in just a half anything. I go full forward through it. I'm a passionate person. Anybody that knows me knows I'm very passionate. I strive for excellence in pretty much anything that I do. I try my best with what I do. 9 months, as one of the applicants said, is a long time. I tend to think that if I went on a ballot, I could win with a popularity vote. I walk through town and I see people every day that I know and recognize, and I've coached a lot of people's grandkids and kids in this school community. So to say that I would, I don't know what 9 months is going to take. But anything I do 100%. So this is my opportunity to try to make the school better, see what this avenue is, because like some of the people said before me, this is layman's for me. I don't know the ongoings or how it works, but my job deals with CMRs, state law, policy and procedure, and following the letter of the law. Any decision that I make in my work can lead to litigation, and I have to stand behind it. And that's how I do my job, no matter what it is, whether it's coaching or my professional life. So with this, that would be the same thing. If it's in black and white, we do it. If it's not in black and white, we don't do it.
And would you be able to make the time commitment that this position would require?
I can make time for anything, ma'am.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any questions from the board?
And questions from the school committee? Thank you very much, Mr. Finley.
Berendis French. Did I pronounce it correctly? Yes. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good
Hello,
evening.
Brandis.
Hi. So to tell you guys a little bit about myself, I am a mom of 2 young kids in the school system. I have a little one who just graduated the pre-K. She was in the special education department. And I have a son that is headed to Toy Town next year in the 3rd grade. So I decided to run. A couple of the teachers know I like being on committees and I love school. I myself am a lifelong learner, and recommended that I apply to be on this. And I thought this is a a wonderful way to help my town. So a couple of the things I've noticed that I love about the school systems are, as previous candidates have said, I really enjoy seeing the teachers who have been there, who are there, how much they love and care and go out of their way for the students. Like I said, my daughter's in special education, but my son is exceptionally bright. And I can say the work that the students, the teachers have given him to make sure he was engaged in school, it was phenomenal. I didn't even have to ask, and I really enjoyed that. So one of the things that I think we could work on is retention. As a nurse leader, that's one of the things I actually kind of specialize in, because you want to work someplace that you love and you want to be. So that's part of my background is retention. So that goes to the like and dislike, or see and want to improve. Another thing that I love about the school system is all the activities they have outside of school for the kids, like the Bubble Fest at Lickety Splits, or other things like that, cheer practice or competition that they have to teach you how to cheer. I really love seeing all of that. I don't remember having any of that as a kid, so my kids love it. I am not hugely familiar with what is going on in the middle school and the high school with the special education. I can say I had a pretty okay experience with my daughter receiving speech. I did have a lack of communication with them, so that would be something, knowing that special education is very important. I would also would like to improve.
Very good. Thank you. I think you hit our two first questions. Chair LaBrie?
Thank you. Could you see yourself running for election next May, if this position, should you be appointed and if it works out?
Absolutely. So, I have kids, but our school system isn't just about my kids. It's not just about your kids. It's about the future of our town, of our state, and of our country. So making a difference, and anybody who knows making a change, it's not an immediate thing. Change takes a while. So I don't feel like I could help make a change in 9 months anywhere, and be effective in that. So absolutely.
Thank you. And would your schedule allow you to make the time commitment that would be required?
Yeah, I'm a nurse leader, so I'm flexible through my days. I do work in Ayer, Massachusetts currently, so it's a little way away, but I'm flexible and always available. And like I said, I personally love learning. So the only reason I went back for my master's was for me. I recently started applying and working for my DNP just because I wanted to. My dad's a school teacher, and he has 3 masters, and I have 1.5. So he's like, when are you going to get more? And I was like, I'm just going to beat you and get a doctorate. So, anytime I can make for you guys, I'll be available.
Thank you. Questions from the Board of Selectmen?
And questions from the school committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have Ed Ford.
Hello, Mr. Ford.
My name is Ed Ford. I was actually asked from some of the student body to apply for the position. As you know, I ran for selectman last election. I do plan to run for selectman again, so to answer the last question first, I would probably looking forward to running for selectman again while advertising the opening for school committee, as opposed to staying in school committee if I could get selectman over.
Okay.
2 things I see that the school is doing positively would be the dual enrollment. I love working with the local colleges. I think it's an awesome idea to branch out a child's ability to learn, not just confide them into a grade, but to allow them to study what makes them happy, because you don't learn things if you are not happy. And the dual enrollment allows them to pick subjects that they enjoy. I also see the Sunshine Cafe as a great way for the students to have a place to gather after school, as well as manage a business-like opportunity, and bring food back to the school system. There's the CAC works very prominently with the Sunshine Cafe, and if we could further that branch and association, I think we could increase student activity in the community as far as grocery store learning, cashiers, and farming hand. As you know, I run the Winchendon Farms group, and we discussed earlier this year about opening in herbal school in one of the vacant factories, as well as agricultural expanding in our school system, just teaching agricultural from planting to nutrients value to actual harvesting and growing animals was a big thing in Winchendon Farms. They really enjoyed that option or thought to add to our school system. Two things I think need to change in our school system is definitely the special ed system. Being a product of the special ed system, I grew up in the special ed system. I know the special ed system pretty well as far as when I was in it. My niece, I believe, was in it when she was attending school here. So yeah, I will be focusing on that and seeing what we can do in that area. But again, special being the emphasis on the word, whenever you put special in front of a child, it becomes a heart attack for a parent, either education or health-wise. It is always, it's a highlighting the child's needs and stressing the parents. So, you know, you got to cater to that as well. And the superintendent issue, I hear a lot of parents complaining about the superintendent not being able to respond to them appropriately. I don't know, maybe opening up a sub-superintendent position so that they have a better kind of secretary system going on to answer people, a relay chain of somebody who can better remote and communicate with the parents, I think would be important.
Thank you. You answered one of my two questions, and then the other one would be as far as the time commitment that would be required, or that is required for the school committee position.
Currently, the only thing on my platter is my defense contract, so I have a wide opening of any time.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments from the board?
And questions from the school committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Labrie, I believe that's all of our applicants. And so at this time, I will invite all remaining members of the school committee and all members of the Board of Selectmen to nominate one or more applicants to be considered as candidates to be voted on. As a reminder, the applicant does not need to be present to be nominated, though I believe all of our applicants are. And at the end of the nomination period will be closed, and we will commence with a period of discussion if needed.
If I may, Mr. Chair. Mr.
Mr.
Chair,
LaPointe.
Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification. Alicia Jordan's term was set at 3 years. Is it my understanding that this is for the remaining 2, if the next election?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The state law states that if a seat becomes vacant, it gets filled until the next annual election. So though she had more time left on her period, this appointment has been posted from August 1st until the next election in May of 2024.
So if I repeat my question, is it a 2-year term in May or a 3-year term?
Oh, in
2.
May.
Sorry, David.
Because it was initially announced as a 3-year
Well, it'll
term.
be a 1-year.
So, right, yeah, it'll be one after that. Okay. Okay.
Happy to accept any nominations.
Yes, Mrs. Blanchard.
I'd like to nominate Anthony Findilly. Sorry for that, I know I said it wrong.
I would second it.
Are we looking for seconds at this point as well, or just nominations?
Yeah.
To get to the next level, okay, yep.
So we have a motion and a second for Anthony Findley. Don't believe we need to vote to just get you on the nomination list. We'll be voting in just a moment, but Anthony Findley is nominated. Other nominations?
Mr. Chair.
Greg?
And I'm going to pronounce the name wrong. Is it Brandis or Brandeis?
Brandis, it's like Candace, not Bar.
Okay, I would like to nominate Brandis.
Second.
We have a nomination and a second for Brandis French. Other nominations?
Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Adam LeBlanc.
Second.
We have a nomination and a second for Adam LeBlanc. Thank you. Other nominations?
Clarifying question, Mr. Chair. Can a member of... Yes, Mr. Ward.
I'm having trouble hearing what's coming from the audience, so could you tell me who's been nominated so far?
So far, we have Anthony Findley, Brandis French, and Adam LeBlanc.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, Mr. Chair, can a member of either board nominate more than one, or are we limited to one nomination per?
Yes, according to the town clerk, there are no limitations on the number of nominations. At the time of voting, each member of the board has the option to vote for one candidate at a time. But
Thank
at
you.
the time of nominations, as many as you'd like.
Thank you for that clarification.
Additional nominations?
So we're doing ranked choice voting? Can we clarify that?
I'm sorry, say that one more
So
time.
are we doing ranked choice voting at this point?
Thank you. So the voting is one vote per candidate without rank voting, and the necessity to elect an individual is the majority of the votes cast, and so therefore with presumably no one abstaining and 9 votes, someone would be appointed with 5 votes. All right.
Mr. Chair, I would also like to nominate Mike Gaspar. Second.
We have a nomination and a second for Mike Gaspar. Other nominations? All right, and I would like to nominate Mike Gaynor.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to nominate Mr. Gaynor. Other nominations?
Should we make it the trifecta for all the money?
Okay, in a moment, we'll be closing the opportunity for nominations. So before we do so, one last call. Any additional nominations for candidates? Hearing none. All right, our period of nomination is closed. That does leave us with 5 candidates. Those 5 candidates are Anthony Findley, Brandis French, Adam LeBlanc, Mike Gaspar, and Mike Gaynor. Happy to open the floor for any discussion of any of the candidates by any members of both boards.
Mr. Chair?
Madam Chair?
On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, I would like to thank everyone who took the time to put in their name, who came here this evening, who spoke to us. Regretfully, I'll say regretfully, we only have one open seat at this time. But as I do want to say thank you very much for coming out. Thank you.
Other discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. LeBlanc? Excuse me.
Point.
Lapointe, excuse me.
That's okay. I just have one question, and I don't know whether this has been vetted out yet, but would Mr. Finley being on the committee jeopardize in any way the coaching positions?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. Perhaps I could ask the superintendent to comment.
Well, I can only comment based on the elections earlier where we had a candidate that was an actual employee and it seemed like it got vetted through the attorneys that was okay. So I don't believe it would impact Mr. Finley's coaching at all.
Great, thank you.
Isn't Mr. LeBlanc also a coach?
Was.
A coach? He was previously. All right, thank you for that
Thank you.
clarification.
Okay, any other discussion? All right. Then therefore, we will accept a roll call vote, and that roll call will include each member of both boards' ability to vote for one candidate at a time. And we will begin, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, with the school committee.
Go ahead.
All right, we'll begin with Ms. Cast.
Who are we voting on?
You can elect to vote for Mr. Finley, Ms. French, Mr. LeBlanc,
Okay.
Mr. Gaspar, or Mr. Gaynor.
Well, you just weren't specific. Okay, thank you. I will vote for Adam LeBlanc.
Well, it's one vote for Adam LeBlanc. Mr. LeBlanc?
Anthony Findlay.
Thank you.
Candace French.
One vote for Brandis French. The chair will vote for Brandis French.
Thank you. Mrs. Anderson?
I think I'm going to vote for Mr. LeBlanc.
Mrs. Blanchard?
Anthony Finley?
Mrs. Lapointe?
Fortunately, it's a tie in my mind, but I'm going to go with Mr. Finley.
Thank you. I will vote for Adam LeBlanc. And Rick Ward?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I came up with 3 names after looking at all 8 and listening to them. And one of my 3 is Brandis French, so I'll be voting for Brandis French.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I believe we have a 3-way tie.
A 3-way tie. Isn't that fantastic? So at this point, we have the opportunity, of course, for further discussion. If anyone would like to indicate their preferred candidate for any reason, you have the prerogative to do so. We also have the prerogative to vote again. We can vote on all 5 candidates, or we can vote on 3, as the 3 did receive the numbers of votes. That is up to the group. So happy to first start with any discussion.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. To prepare for this meeting, I don't have cable at my house, so I spent some hours watching school committee meetings going back a couple of months. I didn't watch the entire school committee meeting. Truthfully, I saw what was on the agenda. I watched the public participation section of those meetings. And what I saw was obviously a lot of upset people, people who want the best for their own kids, for Winchendon. I cast my vote this evening for Adam LeBlanc because in multiple meetings, Mr. LeBlanc stood up in front of the school committee and he spoke about how this was our problem. This was a community's problem. When the students are not getting or apparently don't getting or appears to not getting what they need, if the parents are not getting what they need, it's everyone's problem. It's not just the school committees, it's not just the superintendents. It is a community issue. And that really struck a chord with me, that he wasn't up here pointing fingers. He says, we need to work this together. And as I said, that struck a chord with me, and that is why Mr. LeBlanc has my vote.
Thank you. Other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Greg?
One of the reasons I nominated Brandis, quite frankly, is she's new. She's a fresh face, and I liked very much what she had to say also about the schools, that it's not just, for instance, my grandkids or her kids or anybody's children. We're here to make sure all the children are taught. And one of the things that I really liked was the positive attitude. She sounded like she had some positive energy to add to this school committee, and a fresh outlook, and seemed to be raring to go as far as I was concerned. I know she's been involved with HEAL and some other community activities, so she's not unknown to the community, to Winchendon. She's been involved, and I would like to see some, and I say this having been on this committee for a total of 11 years, I mean, I would like to see some new blood and a new outlook on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Ms. Lapointe?
I'll speak to the tie in my mind and what broke it. There was, all 8 of you had something to say that I liked and that I think would be good for the district, and I would like actually to see you all run in May. But I was really torn between Mr. Finley and Ms. French. And I went with, well, Ms. French, I really like in the resume the focus on DEI and changing culture. We really need to change the culture in this town, and I think that work has started, and I think that work needs to continue. But what made me choose Mr. Finley tonight was his background in grievances. It looks to me that he handles grievances for prisoners as well. He's a correctional officer, and right now I feel like many people's feelings is that we have a lot that needs to be fixed, and I think maybe his experience can lend some insight into really hearing what those grieved people have to say and are experiencing, and potentially where his appointment, you know, might not extend beyond May. I went with Mr. Finley thinking he might have, not that yours wouldn't be beneficial, but the most beneficial impact now, and I would love to see you get the seat in May to kind of follow that up, if that makes sense.
Other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Karen?
Sorry.
If I could, just for the record, I concur with Select Board LaPointe.
Do you get paid well to say that? No. So obviously, so I'd like to say 2 things. I came here in February of 2020, and I ran for my seat when nobody wanted the open seat. So to see 8 candidates, we've come a long way, Winchendon, and I thank you all. And it's been so hard, and I don't think you realize how hard, and I am so appreciative that everybody put their names in, and I've been pulling my hair out, literally, trying to figure out who would be the best candidate. And honestly, you're all great candidates in my mind, and just the fact that you want to step up and do this for our children. And I think, you know, one of the things that, one of the reasons that I did vote for Adam is he is the only one, you know, and not that Brandy did not say children, but she was mostly mentioning her children, and other people mentioned their children, but Adam said for our children. And in all of his addresses to the board, he has mentioned our children, meaning the town of Winchendon. And for me, as somebody who came here, as someone who for 30 years has worked for our children across the state, that is, for me, the most important thing, is that we're working for all of our children at every moment. So for me, I need somebody that's going to work for all of our children at every moment on this board. So that was a big reason that I chose Adam. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? I will point out that I think we have a lot of fantastic candidates in this group, not just those that were nominated, but those that also sit in the hall tonight and were not. What we have is a plethora of experiences, and the experiences that we have seen through folks that work in different industries, folks that work in, whether you are in manufacturing, horticulture, nursing, bringing your perspective and your professional expertise as well as your passion for this town and these schools. That's what a town needs and what a school committee needs. I ultimately voted for Brandis French because of some of the similar reasons that Ms. LaPointe mentioned, and also because of the opportunity for her to bring some of her professional expertise into the schools from a different industry. I believe most of your career has been in nursing. However, the idea of bringing in expertise in and being able to advise the schools on how best to retain teachers and administrators is really the kind of work that Brandis does. And so for that reason, I was glad to vote for you. So you see us struggling then, right?
That's why I said Miss French.
Good move.
I should have followed Danielle's lead.
Other discussion?
Mr. Ward, any comments?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The reason voted for French, Ms. French, is that I've been following for a year now all the school board meetings. I've followed every bit of social media about what's going on at the school. And after a year of that, I feel, I see the dedication of some of the parents who were at these meetings, and some of them are candidates tonight. But I feel we need a new approach, a new face, somebody who hasn't been in that fray but will bring new ideas to the committee, the school committee. So that's why I voted for Brandy.
And if I just, Mr. Chair, if I may just tag on that, I think everyone tonight, with the exception of Mr. Barbaro, would be new to the committee. Bringing in a different perspective, different point of view. I've been quoted as saying an outside perspective is a very good thing. All of the candidates have their strengths, 100% agreed there.
Somebody showing off the exhaust? Other discussion? Okay. Offer an opportunity to vote to the committee again, and we have the option to vote for 3 candidates if we would like to winnow the list down, or we can vote for all 5 again, certainly yield to the prerogative, to the preference of the boards.
Mr. Chair?
Ms. LaPointe?
I would make a motion that we vote from the 3.
Yeah, second that.
We have a motion and a second. On the school committee, those in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Roll call vote by the Board of Selectmen. Rick, did you hear the motion?
Just give me the 3 names again.
It's Brandis French, Anthony Findley, and Adam LeBlanc. The motion before us is to limit the next round to those 3. Mrs. Anderson?
Yeah.
Mrs. Anderson? We're voting to
Approve the motion or not?
approve the motion. Yeah. Aye. Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. LaPointe?
Aye.
Mrs. Blanchard?
Aye.
And chair votes aye.
All right, so opening up the voting on the three members, the three candidates, Anthony Findley, Brandy French, and Adam LeBlanc. And we'll start with Greg.
Ms. French.
And Mr. Lapointe.
Anthony Findley.
Findley. Ms. Cass?
Adam LeBlanc.
Thank you. Oh, and the chair votes for Brandy French.
Mrs. Blanchard?
Anthony Finley.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Anthony Finley.
Mr. Ward?
Brandis French.
Mrs. Anderson? Chair votes for Adam LeBlanc.
I'll also vote for Adam LeBlanc.
Well, that went nowhere.
Roll that dice again.
Happy to take any discussion. Tonight, we do not have to finalize our vote. We do have the prerogative to do that on another night. I would prefer to, to Karen's point.
No, we
I
really
prefer
do.
to. But we, if we cannot come to a consensus, we do have the prerogative to do this at another time. It would be the same group, so similar outcomes. Happy to invite any discussion. Would we like to vote again?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Ward?
I take it we have a tie again?
Yes, we do.
This is the second tie?
Yes, it is.
Really? You can keep going? I know I'm not changing, but really you have a failure to elect going on here. And it should be turned over to the town clerk to have a special election if it can't be solved soon.
We're not done.
You're not done.
We're not done.
Your point is taken.
One more.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just a quick question, a recommendation, if you don't mind. Board members, please.
Okay, go ahead.
Come up to the microphone.
Hey, we got a three-way tie. That's pretty darn impressive.
For the record, your name, please.
Record, Adam LeBlanc, member or candidate number 3. Both candidates are vested, as well as I. Coach Finley's got 20-plus years. She's got new ideas. So to make this process easier on everybody else on the board, I'm going to withdraw my name. And I'll just run when the next seat comes up.
Is that a
That way
promise?
That way we can get an answer tonight for who's going to get it, whether it be Ms. French or Mr. Finley. And then I'll run when the time comes. Does that make it easier on everybody else? I appreciate the support by the ones who voted for me, I do. But there needs to be an answer. We need to have a button seat.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Lapointe?
I would make a motion to accept Mr. LeBlanc's withdrawal from the candidacy.
Before we, no.
I was going to say I'd second it with regret, but.
Are we open for discussion?
We have a motion and a second to accept Mr. LeBlanc's withdrawal of his name. Yes, that puts us at discussion, and I suspect Karen would like to go.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
yes. Adam, the only problem I have is that, and I didn't want to bring this up here. I know that you and Mr. King have said that the town attorney has said that Mr. Findley will not have an issue, but the AG's office disagrees. So the AG's office has said that Mr. Findley may have a conflict of interest. And this is something that I sent you previously when we had this discussion, when there was a candidate that was possibly going to run for an elected seat. And I gave you that information previously. So.
Yeah, 1 second. Are you done?
So that would be my concern, is that we may have a conflict of interest. So yes.
If I
yeah,
may, do you mind if I?
Are you going to address her?
Yes.
Okay.
So the school committee had the potential for a candidate to be written in on the ballot during the last election. That candidate had a form of employment with the school district through our attorney, the attorney that represents the school district and provides opinions to guide our work. We sought that legal opinion on the right of that individual to not only retain their employment, but also continue to serve, retain their employment and serve on the school committee. The response back from the attorney was that the individuals that are written into the law that are expressly prohibited from working for our district and holding a school committee seat were limited to certain positions, which did not include that person's position. We have not, to my knowledge, expressly checked on the eligibility of a coach, so that we could be, to Ms. Ms. Cast's comment, this could be an apples or oranges situation where we would do our due diligence, of course, before August 1st to assure that any candidate that was appointed to the position was eligible to serve.
Mrs. Anderson.
Could I just would like to tell Mr. LeBlanc that I also watch the school committee meetings, but I have cable and I watch them as they're happening from the safety of my sofa. And I just wanted to let you know that I do appreciate your candor. I appreciate that you came to these meetings and you spoke out, and I liked your insight, and so I do hope that you run again. I would love to see it. But a lot of people watch, even though you don't know it.
Yes, ma'am.
I think Mr. Finley had a,
Mr. Finley, would you like to address? Yes, please.
So for the record, Anthony Finley. So to Ms. Cass' point, I'm an employee wheel with the school. I am yet to be appointed to a coaching position, so at this moment in time, your point is mute. I'm not a coach for the upcoming season. I have not been hired. That should be no presence on the election that's going on at this moment in time. If what you're saying about the Attorney General may or may not be correct, and Mr. Forsythe's wait it out at the end. But at the current point in time, I am not a coach.
Okay.
I have not been appointed. I have not even heard back on the fact that I applied. Thank you.
Other discussion? We still have a motion on the floor.
Yep.
Other discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair, just my final point and just some very, very quick research, I would need to do more, but it appears to me that actually stipended positions, which I believe the coaching isn't technically an employee, so that might change the conversation as well.
Thank you. Other discussion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor to accept Adam LeBlanc's withdrawal of his candidacy. We have had our discussion period, and therefore we will move to a vote. And we'll begin with Ms. Cast.
Right now, we're voting on
Adam's withdrawal.
withdrawal.
Mr. LeBlanc.
I'm not going to dishonor his withdrawal, so yes. Aye.
aye.
Aye. The chair votes aye.
Mrs. Blanchard.
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe.
Aye.
Mr. Ward.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Chair will vote no. Motion passes.
Very good. That leaves us with two candidates, Mr. Anthony Findley and Miss Brandy French. And happy to accept any discussion before voting on those two candidates. Seeing none, we'll start with the school committee and begin with Mr. Vine.
Brandy.
And Mr. Lapointe.
Anthony.
Ms. Cast.
Anthony.
And the chair will vote for Brandy French.
Mrs. Blanchard.
Anthony?
Mrs. Lapointe.
Anthony?
Mrs. Anderson. Mr. Ward?
Brandis French.
Thank you. The chair will vote for Mr. Findley.
Congratulations, Mr. Finley.
And a huge thank you to everyone.
Yes,
Huge,
thank you.
huge round of applause to everyone.
With that, on just the school committee side, we will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? And Ms. Cast?
Aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Madam Chair?
Thank you to the
They
Board of
make a
Selectmen.
Make a motion for a 5-minute recess?
Okay.
The board has moved for a five-minute recess. It has been seconded. Roll call vote. Mrs. Blanchard?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mr. Ward? Mrs. Anderson?
Oh, okay.
Chair votes aye. We are in recess at 7:30.
So I already signed this one.
Thank you. I'd like to call back to order this meeting of the Winchton Board of Selectmen.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Lapointe.
I would make a motion to take 5.1 and 5.2 out of order and do them now.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. I'm sorry, roll call vote. Mrs. Blanchard.
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe.
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson. Aye. Mr. Ward.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So we are going to jump to 5.1, which is Destination Winchendon, Phase 1 presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for your patience, gentlemen and ladies.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Selectmen, I have documents that I would like to hand out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So before us this evening, we have Dr. James Samuels and Jacob Brewer. For the last multiple months, we've been working with Dr. Samuels and Company, as I call it, on Destination Winchendon, looking at areas in town, how we can make this a destination town for people to come and spend some money and have a good time, enjoy themselves here in Winchendon. So there's two items on the agenda this evening for Stonegate Alliance. First is a review of the Phase 1 project, which is drawing to a close June 30th. So let's start with that. For the record, if you would state your names, and you might want to pull the microphone
A little closer.
closer to you, yes.
Thank you.
You should be able to pull it forward. There we go. Okay. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. James Samuels.
Madam Chair, it's Jacob Brewer.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, and through you to the board and to the town manager. Justin, could you give some context as we segue?
Absolutely. So to kick things off a little bit, a large piece of the work that I've been doing with my team over the past 2 years is trying to find a way to approach the local economic problems in Winchendon from a different angle. And in part, a large piece of that was informed by the 2013 Downtown Revitalization Plan. It was something that I had referenced as early as my interview process before I even started in town. And it's not uncommon for organizations to run into the habit of having studies conducted. This one in particular was done by UMass. It was pretty high quality. But then getting in the habit of just putting that study on a shelf and not actually doing anything with it. And so what we've been trying to do for the past 2 years is to work with that downtown revitalization plan in concert with the recent master plan to try to find ways to get movement on some of these stickier economic issues. And I think in a broader sense, a lack of focus in some areas, but also I would say an issue with the way that we are approaching I would say non-traditional parcels in town, trying to fix it with traditional means, which simply wasn't working. So, and what I mean by that is having a under-leveraged asset in town and kind of hoping that somebody would come by and invest in it, rather than taking a hard look at the property, seeing what the obstacles are for that property, The dam at the White's Mills comes to mind, for example, or trying to make a best effort to highlight and incentivize to investors, why they would want to come to Winchendon and invest their private dollars. And so a lot of what we've been doing and working with Dr. Samuel's team is trying to broaden that conversation with additional members of the public and trying to receive feedback about what the town feels its underutilized assets are and how we can better position the town in such a way that it's more appealing for private investment.
Thank you. So for the last several months, I've been astonished. I'm 75, and the last time I was in Winchendon was 50 years ago. And somehow I recall meeting somebody and buying a chair, a wooden chair, So my wife said to me, tonight, find out, where we're going to stay over and where we're going to go out to dinner and all that. And I said, we're working on it. So that's how we came to the project. One of our recent works, the New American College Town, chronicles destination towns not only throughout New England, but across the nation. I met Justin because someone told me he'd be interested in the book, and I had read the UMass study thinking that everything had been implemented. And it had not been implemented, in fact, very little. To be fair to UMass at the time, who was a client of ours at that time, although I didn't know about the project, their view was limited to just the town, downtown, and the village of Winchendon. And what began to emerge as we traveled was villages that maybe, do you mind if I pass something out?
No, not at all.
Of course.
Thank you.
I passed them out already.
Yep, he already did.
Thank you. Thank you. So I don't know if you've seen the welcome signs recently. So we ought to start to think about how we brand ourselves, how we wayfind, and how we plan and program. The fact of the matter is that Justin has had his eye on this since he got here. And this was not our idea. This was an idea that percolated up. So we asked to speak to people directly, and they made folks available, and Justin and Audrey will help me with individual names when you ask me when we met. But we met. I've met every week for 4 months. Over the last 6 weeks, we did the feasibility study, and what we found was that there were indeed underleveraged assets. I knew of no site that I've ever seen that has 3 rivers, 2 lakes, ponds, a state forest, a municipal forest, a park. And so the natural resources, because we're moving towards adventure, outdoor, adventure tourism right now, and we feel that that's an area that you own from a natural resource point of view. We feel that you've done all the right moves in terms of history and culture, and after all, historic preservation has to be very high up on the list for criteria. We've been to small manufacturers, we've been to small business people, we've been to people that are kind of like not in the real estate business, but they have ideas what they want to talk about. And so in a moment, I'm going to ask Justin if he can help us walk through some sites which are on his database. I'd also like to talk about the culture and performance, the fine visual and performing arts. I was amazed about the amphitheater until I arrived and saw it, and about the Arts Center, and about what we envisioned actually downtown was a river walk. And what is the common parlance for the green buildings, Justin?
I apologize. What was the start of that sentence?
What do we label the green buildings?
Did we give them an official name?
Yeah, okay.
I don't believe we landed on one beyond the green buildings, but off behind Front Street, if you're looking down the hill, they're kind of tucked away back there. Yeah.
I'd like to be able to say that we identified that, but sure enough, Justin was in the office thinking about destination. He was walking towards the outside window. He came, he looked at it, and he said to Brian, we should think about that. And Brian followed up, and sure enough, they're doing their own appraisal right now, which I'm very encouraged about in terms of anchor tenants. We also tried to look at grants that would be available for community development, economic development, jobs creation, tourism, retail, mixed use, tax incentives, capital in the form of mass development, which is a major step that you did make, Justin, you made, which is to get mass development to get behind us. And I'm glad to say that as I visited each site, I have to say I didn't see anything that was not structurally sound at all. I did not see anything that was inappropriate for mixed use at all. And I keep looking at the new administration, new legislature, which really wants to build a lot of market rate housing. Not just public housing, but housing. And so, as I assessed the last 50 years, this would be a great place to come and visit, come back, raise a family, go to school here, practice here. I just love it, And when you visit Camp Samuels, you'll see why, because our home quarters are very much at the center of how we see the world in terms of environment.
Is there a mute?
Rick, are you still there? Rick, are you still there? I think we've lost Rick.
Good to go?
He'll have to call back in.
Okay. So what are the factors that we look at when we identify sites? And I should say all of these sites were pre-qualified by Justin and Brian and Audrey as well. There were no mysteries to it. So here are some of the factors that we look at when we consider site locations in destination towns. Access, is it accessible? Is there egress? Is there collateral in the real estate? Do they really own it, free of any encumbrances? And it's a small, manageable mortgage? Because eventually, we have to attract developers who can meet that amortization schedule, that monetization. We look at environmental preservation and mitigation. It's key. It's all about sustainability, and that starts with our own natural resources. Functionality. It used to be that you'd have one gymnasium for one function, Now they have collapsible walls, they have flippable classrooms, so health and safety, if that wasn't a priority before 2020, it is now. Excuse me. Thank you. The normal test is what's called highest and best use. And highest and best use is determined by the function of the building or buildings, the revenue-producing capability, how it serves the public good, and whether it restores and preserves historical sites. And there are many in this town that I wasn't aware of. One day was totally dedicated to that and developing an idea about what about a Toy Town trail? What about a trail of villages residential? There has been an expressed interest for people my age. No, I'm not an empty nester. That was 20 years ago. That's 55. And they have a senior living, which is 65 and older. And then they have what's called assisted living. And in fact, we've already talked to the hospital about it. And there is a relationship between the hospital and the Winchendon schools and the Winchendon Health Center in connection with the school system, as I understand it from her. We also look at land assembly. Are we going to be able to assemble the pieces, or are we still not going to have the land that we need to meet that model? We have to look at traffic and parking, and a notion. It used to be that you can't get here, and I got here tonight in an hour and 14 minutes in the rain. We came from Lake Cochituate in West Natick. So you definitely can get here. And when you get here, There's a lot. All of the ingredients are there, Audrey. We just need the recipe to put it together, and we think we have it. You can read it. ROI and public community use. We think about public and community use at the very beginning, because if you don't, you're never going to take care of the public and the community. So we can envision a civic center on this site. And no, it wasn't my idea, actually. It was Audrey's, and it wasn't the owner's. And the Riverwalk, that was Justin. And so as we walked, the uses emerged and the capital financing emerged for the business model we have to create. So sustainable need and demand, it's not just about need. That's easier to predict. What's tougher to predict is demand. I tell my kids, I'm 75, I got kids 28 and 29. I tell the kids that they get better make up their mind what they like doing and are they any good at it, and somebody's got to pay for it. And that's the difference between need and demand. Need, unmet need, can be segmentalized and predicted. But demand, and so that means that if you're not open to creating demand, then it's probably not the destination for you. There are some hiccups, a few little bumps in the road. One of them is we need to think through a long-term utilities and particularly water solution to our growth. Having done projects like this before, it is not atypical to deal with water issues because of the growth and not because of bad news, you know? So that's a big piece of this in the future. Another big piece is to get them here, because I believe if we can get developers here, we can close. But to do that, we need to reach out to them. The one thing the pandemic did for us, I'm a small business, we do campus tours, is that we immediately had to go into the kind of Zoom area, and we had to go to drone-based campus visits because the buses weren't running to take the kids out there. We need to develop just a brief 5-minute video that tells our story so that we can attract the interest in the developers investing in this property. Madam Chair, I spoke too long. I didn't plan to speak because it's been quite a bit. Could we allow them to ask questions through you?
Yes, absolutely. If I may just suggest, before we get to the questions, Justin, that the TV's not on, so I'm not sure where you are. Towards the bottom of you, further down in your proposal, where it talks about findings and recommendations. Findings and recommendations.
Yeah.
A little bit further, I think.
Yeah, right there.
No, keep going.
I know, but to the next page.
Where it has the oval pictures.
Yeah, and if you just.
Page 5?
Five.
Page 5.
Sorry.
There we are.
Yeah. Could we just briefly go through and talk about the areas that we have looked at?
Yeah, can you just drop it down a teeny bit more so I can see what's above it?
Oh.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, so I used a chosen word. I described the sign, the current sign, the welcome sign, as decrepit. And Jacob reminded me tonight when we came in, the good news is that the new sign may not be there, but the grass went higher, and so we couldn't see it this time. But we really need to have a sense of arrival for that junction at Route 2 and 202. It's really an asset. And so we've been looking at a number of options, and one of them turned out to be the former clubhouse of the golf course that's held and titled by the private school, the Winchendon School. And this is a drive-by. And so I had lunch with the headmaster. And by the way, I guess you'll have a new headmaster that's coming in from New York. They're realigning some stuff that's going on now. But he said that they're very open to partnering for those purposes. They're very interested in partnering both with the town and the public schools So Audrey, since we talked last, I've heard from him, and we're going to get together soon in the next several weeks.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Camp Winchendon.
So Camp Winchendon was taken as a name from Camp Samuels, which is a place that we've developed over 50 years. And this particular model is that out in the Lake Denison area, we would not only have some tents, but we would have, for your age, glamping and
Yeah, I use the term glamping.
Glamping,
Glamorous
yes.
camping. More upscale experiences.
So now, and I've been reading about, there are people that do just that kind of camping in winter camping. They go out and they camp in the middle of January and February. That's becoming a hot thing, no pun intended. So Camp Winchendon was to leverage the rivers, the lakes, the ponds, the parks, the forestry, the arboriculture, the horticulture, all of those related, and agricultural tourism. We do a lot of work with Stockbridge, and we also do work with the local colleges. Over the last probably 50 years, we did the downtown for Fitchburg State. We did Mount Wachusett, their master plan. We did, I have to think back, each of the ones we did, and none of them had the kind of agricultural tourism. We did meet with some new owners, Audrey, and a retitle, Farming is Life.
Yeah.
I would say they're studying their options. Is that a fair statement to say?
It is.
Before they get in too deep to traditional farming. We're also going through a period of yield. We met with HEAL. We think that's a terrific project. The grocery market, the farmer's market, the food deficit, they're on top of every aspect of this. But that's not the only agricultural site, right? There are others as well that we visited. We feel that the farm-to-table eatery business is right up your market, and we can see you doing partnerships with Stockbridge and other agricultural programs throughout the state. I think we did the Fort Devens, Mount Wachusett campus, we did that one as well at that time.
And just touching on the agriculture at the same time that we met with the new owners of they've renamed their farm Farming is Life. In a previous life, it was Charlie's Red House, Red Barn. We met with
Swiss
Smith's Country Cheese. Yes.
And that was really an interesting
and
one.
it was a very good meeting with the.
They're growing, and they want to invest.
Yeah.
So that's on my map anyways, in terms of ag tourism.
Yep.
In fact, they'd be a great grant partner. Both of those would be great grant partners.
Yep. Amphitheater and Arts Center.
It's just a knockout. I said to myself, as we rode over, I couldn't get it into my head what it would be. And then it was so much more. It was a theater in itself, you know? And I'm a sucker for that because we're heavily invested in musical theater. So that's an important part of our practice. So that's great. And a creative arts center and the whole creative economy and fine visual and performing. You've got it all. You've got groups that have been meeting, by the way. You know, people that are interested in art, people that are interested in poetry, in creative writing. And so,
Yep.
Next.
The playaway facilities, this was HEAL. We met with HEAL as well. They were there.
I think I described it
Yeah.
accurately, yeah. So I think we should go down to the next domino.
Our green buildings.
Right. Audrey, what was your take? You walked through. Do you think it was sound?
Yeah, I was there. Oh, the interior is absolutely beautiful, post and beam. The exterior obviously doesn't look like much, and you know there's cosmetic stuff and some, you know, floors and ceilings that need to be done. But the outside structures looked, from my untrained eye, it's beautiful buildings.
Nothing but a new roof with natural light.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So some
We just
windows
did a
facing the river.
Yeah, we just did a study on the impact of natural light on kids' cognitive development. athletic development. So, yeah, it needs a little light, but boy, it could be
Yeah.
spectacular.
And the owner of these buildings was probably one of the first people outside of, town employee committee members that we brought down to Camp Natick, Mr. Dane.
Sean.
And he's very excited about the potential. He has wanted to do something with those buildings for some time, but he doesn't have the financial backing. So he's very excited about that.
I asked him what took him so long. He said, nobody asked me. So I said,
Yeah.
see, yes, but the fact of the matter is, if Justin hadn't been walking out
Looking out that
today,
window.
we'd be way back on that.
Then we have the historical tour, the historical aspect.
Right, so beyond the culture, you have I know you know this, a venerable military history. It's only one of 2 state-owned veterinary cemeteries, veteran cemeteries.
Aren't
And
there 3?
I thought there's 2.
There is 2.
There's Bourne, Holyoke, and us.
Is it, there's a third one? Where is it?
Bourne, Holyoke,
Warren.
and us.
Ah,
I didn't know about
thank you,
one.
good.
I thought it was only 2.
Thank you, yeah, there you
Thank
go.
you. Okay.
You know, and you don't think
We'll
anybody's
correct
listening.
And Dawn O'Neill, we had taken Dawn, Tiffany Newton, and Miranda Jennings down
Yep.
to Camp Samuels with Brian and I. And Dawn reached out to Betsy Matthew, thank you. And she sent Dawn, she had made a driving tour map of Winchendon, many years ago. So we were talking about, driving tour, walking tour, having historical markers, like Dr. Samuel said, actually, capitalizing on the history of the town.
And the other thing, Audrey, that you called my attention to when we first met was to pay attention to a walkable Winchendon.
Mm-hmm.
And these villages should be walkable. They should be unforgettable, remarkable. And I took that to heart. And so you'll see that throughout the report. I don't know what to say about Old Murdoch. It's just such a treasure when I look at it, architectural treasure. And I have 2 feelings. One is that I'd like to attract colleges and universities to open a comm university center there. The other feeling I have about it is what a great place for market rate housing. Beautiful. And you can see it. I mean, if you go out throughout the Commonwealth, 351 cities and towns, the most common is to declare a building as excess and then designate it and use it. Why? Because they raise the money, lowering the tax rate and increasing the appropriation for the schools. That's how it really works. Because whatever we do, we need to build a business model that works not only for the landowner, but works for the town in terms of taxes
Right,
and
Yep.
tax distribution, Madam Chair.
yes. We didn't visit the RHI building, but it was mentioned as
For mixed use
it's
and
right on
residential
Central
as well.
Street. Yep,
Which would be ideal.
yep. The
What do you
River,
wanna-
River Street sites, we stopped at the old power station halfway down Tannery Hill. We talked about the old Converse Gardens that started at the top of the hill across from the Historical Society. What could be done to help, Riverwalk or walkway.
I'm not quite sure what to talk about Springs. It was an amazing place. She wouldn't allow us inside. We did a pretty comprehensive walk-around. The outside appearance is fine. I talked to her briefly. She wanted to get together. I think she had recalled that she had met me, I didn't recall, on another project. And before I get back to her, I just want everybody to take a close look at that, because it looks like a lot of people made promises, Audrey, over the years.
Right.
And at this point, if I'm going to sit down with her, I would like to know what the tax situation has been.
Yeah, we'll have to have some conversations prior to any
Right.
meeting.
It's
Yep.
funny, you flipped the presentation which is perfect. Now I don't have to do that other part. You follow what I'm saying? So that's great. Cemetery?
Yeah, we spoke about the cemetery. Waterville Plaza, the day, a week or so ago, that I reached out to the owner, he told me that he was selling it and closing on it that afternoon. So I did ask him to provide my contact information to the new owner. As we know, it's drastically underutilized. The amount of traffic that goes by there is huge, commuter traffic and local traffic. So that's why we had identified it as a potential area for work.
We think that's perhaps the most under-leveraged asset. And I don't know, what's his plan? Did he mention about retirement or anything?
I have not had a conversation with the new owner yet,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
This just happened, by the way, right? The change of an ownership.
Yes, yeah, if in fact it
Like
did still
2 weeks
happen,
ago,
but
something
it
like
was,
that,
yeah, yeah.
Winchendon Furniture, was it Glenn? I'm sorry. Who was it?
That's actually their location in Keene, but that's okay. At the last meeting that we had here on the 21st, one of the attendees was Glenn Hunt, who is as you know, represents Robinson Brothers Foundation for Winchendon. And he put forth the Winchendon Furniture structure and buildings on Central and Railroad as a potential place for, I mean, that would be perfect for market rate housing. It's right downtown, et cetera.
It's a great location.
So that's why Central Street is, Winchendon Furniture is on the list. And I just want to make sure everybody's clear. We've identified all these different locations. This is a long-term project, and we're not going to jump into all of these at once. Absolutely not. What we'll have to do when we look at the potential of Phase 2 and such is identify the parcels that we feel we can get the most accomplished in the most exponential way as possible. So yes, there's a lot of things on here. Some of these sites have a history with the town, some favorable, some not so favorable. But just know that just because we have them on our presentation this evening, it doesn't mean we're going to jump in with both feet at any one particular site. I just want to make that clear.
And indeed, these sites all will have independent appraisals. Both the owners will have theirs, if they're smart, and the town will have their independent appraisals.
Right.
And I've already started my appraisal. So. You want to talk about next steps? Or?
Not quite yet. I'd like to open up to the board. Questions, comments?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Blanchard?
I think now that the town has the streets completed, I think that's really held the businesses from coming into town was the past couple of years of all the road construction. It's made it very difficult for the business owners that were there, let alone the new businesses wanting to even look at this town. And now that the town is, the streets are there, the businesses are now more available, it seems to me like a very expensive Angie's List. I don't understand. We've got money we need for water lines, and those are high priorities. And this, to me, just seems like an Angie's List for $18,000 for 45 days. It gives me panic on the money spent on something, on this flyer. Some of these pictures aren't even in our town. That's a picture of Winchendon Furniture in Keene. You're publishing things that aren't even, it's kind of, so it just has me concerned with some of the concerns we have. And I think now that we have our towns, let's see how things start to go. But right now, where things are, I'm just a little concerned with this.
Any other questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair, if I
Anderson.
could pose the question, one of the drawbacks to Winchendon that we're finding very difficult to overcome and have for quite some time is we're not off the main artery. It's not easy to get to Winchendon, which discourages a lot of investment. It discourages a lot of business from coming here because it's just a pain in the neck to get to sometimes. And how would you propose addressing that?
Well, if the question is about how fast we grow, that's a real important question. Because what we don't want to end up is having a perfect town and then having this metropolis that changes the quality of life. The charm for me is the charming neighborhoods. To me, this is an adventure that's surrounded by splendid isolation. So I really do think that these assets that you saw tonight are capable of producing much more revenue for the town and the public works and the school system and the recreation at the end of the day. And we're all here as stewards of those properties for the future generations. So.
But you're not addressing the situation that it's still a 20-minute ride off Route 2 for outside investors to come here.
Oh, okay. Your question is it's not accessible, and so is anybody really going to come here?
Right.
Okay.
And invest, because we're looking at millions of dollars in investment.
That's why we're on this project. The next phase is to develop the investor prospectus. Audrey, this is what I was hoping we could talk about. And the video, and do the analysis on demand so we can show that we are a quality place to visit and to come back to. So the Winchendon I visited today was much more accessible than 50 years ago. And it's my expectation the project will not fail for traffic and will not fail for growth.
Madam Chair, could I add something to that as well?
Yes, Mr. Sosbach.
Sure. And so Selectwoman Anderson, the question is absolutely a fair question. And I think one component of this is that the local economic situation in Winchendon had suffered from market conditions, and that the factors that you're dealing with here in town kind of are what they are. You can change them a little bit, but your kind of biggest hope is that the market is going to change to meet you. And I think that's the biggest thing that's changed over the past couple of years, is Dr. Samuels touched on the housing market in particular, a huge push from the state in terms of investment in housing. You've seen full saturation in Boston and people pushing out this way, but I think another component that you touched on is the drive, which I know all too well. And one component that I think has really changed in the past 3 or 4 years in particular is the existence of remote work. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic really exposed that. We've seen a solid, steady stream of folks moving into town that traditionally wouldn't have moved into town because they don't need to drive into the office in Everett anymore, or they only have to once a week or something like that. And so if they're not staring down an hour-long commute there and back every single day, that kind of changes the dynamic for those folks a little bit. That type of work also happens to sometimes demand a higher salary. And so you're looking at a potential shift in demographics where you have folks moving out this way because they want a slower type of life. They want a smaller town feel. They want to enjoy the historic assets that the town has. They want to enjoy the recreational outdoor opportunities, the lakes and the rivers and the woods that were highlighted in the 2013 redevelopment plan, but we never really capitalized on. And that's something that's really kind of shifted in earnest in the past few years.
And Madam Chair and Selectman Anderson, if I could also add, Winchendon finds itself in between a lot of, I can't stress this enough, and this is what the town manager mentioned, they find itself in and surrounded by a lot of natural resources. A lot of people in my generation like to hike, and Winchendon finds itself equidistant between Mount Monadnock to the north and Mount Wachusett to the south. Winchendon should be able to take that market and capitalize on it by including some of these initiatives that we've mentioned tonight. We already have traffic coming to this area for those natural resources, and I believe our initiatives are there and to sort of capitalize on that, if you will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mrs. Lapointe.
I like the presentation. I like the idea. It's very in sync with our master plan. my reservation in here, and at the risk of being negative, and I might be the only one, there's, in reading the letter, there's somewhat, in my mind, a large focus put on the Winchendon School, the private school here in town. And I would like to see us, we're at a time when we're trying to keep our public schools afloat. I don't want to focus on the private school in town. I want to make our public school district flourish. And I don't know, that gives me a little bit of hesitation.
90% of the conversation was because they held title to the clubhouse for the golf course. And so that really was the focus. They weren't looking to push out or crowd out the public schools in any way. In fact, what's interesting is they had no early college, and the public schools have a very developed early college dual enrollment.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that I convey what I talked to them about.
Yeah.
And it was about them making that available to us as a welcome center.
I could see a land transfer, but I don't know. I would be hesitant to make them a strategic partner in the endeavor.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to those conversations yet, but your point is taken, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of the discussion, you know, just look at the first hour that we spent here tonight, appointing one person to the school committee, and the education is so important. By investing in what we have, I think it's one of the best ways that we can provide for our kids. By making Winchendon vibrant, financially stable, that's going to give the students, with the proper usage of everything, that's going to provide for our kids. Anything else from the board on the presentation for Phase 1? If the board has no objections, I'll open it up to the audience. Anyone who wishes to come forward and make any comments? Yes, Mrs. Lapointe.
Well, I'm really interested to hear more about Phase 2, which I hope we're going to get to. But what I find interesting thus far is the opportunity to focus our economic development efforts. Because ever since I moved back home, almost 10 years ago now, I don't have a good sense of what that is. I know in our master plan it talks about agriculture and recreation. This feels consistent with that, but yet we're seeming to have trouble in getting ourselves off the ground and engaged in following through on our master plan. Matter of fact, we'll be having some meetings on that coming up. This interests me because it provides a lens on that, and I'm very curious about how we could come together as a town and with our different committees. I mean, I learned I was the only one that applied to be on the Destination Winchendon Committee. But I think that it would be possible for us to pull people to require that many of our existing towns and our committees and boards that have something to do with economic development, overall community health and well-being and all of that, need to provide a member who represents that committee. And we begin to knit ourselves together that way. So I'm intrigued at how we might leverage this in ways that we haven't been able to leverage anything thus far. We have a lot of pieces here. I also want to say that a lot of the things I'm hearing are consistent. Heal Winchendon and the Community Heart and Soul Project has collected a whole bunch of stories and surveys from people that we're just processing right now, and they've started to come out at some of the festivals in terms of the themes that are important to people in this town, things they care about, what matters, why they're here, what their hopes are. And I'm hearing a lot of stuff that's very consistent with that. And like I said, it'll be coming out soon, so that, and refining it and moving from, so this is what people are talking about they want, and these are some of their ideas for it. How do we go about doing it? Which is always the question and the problem. We have no shortage of ideas and plans and all of that, but how do we follow through? And like I said, my interest in this is there something here we can build on to finally follow through on so many of the plans we have. The other good one, quite frankly, is the report that came out of the Robinson Broadhurst Forum in September of 2013, because it had a lot of the same similar things on it. So,
Thank you. That may be a good segue into phase, I'm sorry, one second. Now, Mr. Ford?
As you know, I work kind of with Heal Winchendon, so the segments about Heal Winchendon in the R&H building, I'm really looking forward to see actually come to fruition, as well as the portion about the embracing our wildlife management areas and using them as a tourist attraction like they should be. As some of you know, I am going to reapply for my guidance service this winter to take people winter camping, as well as winter hunting and fishing in these wildlife management areas. I am hoping to get 10 minutes of selectmen time for the next meeting for this. But yeah, I think we definitely need to move forward with a project similar to this, a better game plan.
Thank you. Phase 2, would you give us a look at what would be the next steps if we vote to move forward?
The next step in the process would be to take all of the outcomes of Phase 1 and begin to build what's called an investor prospectus, which showcases the assets and places Winchendon in a desirable category to, as we said, visit, return to, raise families, go to school, pay taxes. We also have to do our own independent appraisal of the properties. Appraisals usually sound very easy from the outside because you just look at the comparable appraisal. What did so-and-so pay for so-and-so's house on such and such street? Many of these projects, these sites are fairly unique. And so we need to be prepared to also monetize the sites by capitalizing the income. That means figuring out a business model for each of the projects, what the capital outlay costs are going to be, what the financing, what the soft costs are, what the renderings are going to be, what's the permitting, the occupancy, final design, concept, construction for each project. And then we need to figure out what we can pay back, because it's not about how much money you borrow in this particular endeavor. It's how much you can pay back. And so each of these projects requires that careful appraisal. We also need to vertically integrate this project with the other initiatives that you just heard about tonight so that everybody is on the same page. And we'll be sharing our information and looking forward to reading their information from the surveys that they've conducted. We also need to develop final site selection criteria, which I reviewed tonight because I was suggested that we do that the last time, so I thought I'd give a little glimpse of how those will roll out. We have to identify and finalize and write the grant proposals in the next stage, the next 45 days. And then finally, we need to do a correlation analysis and prepare our final report with site-specific recommendations.
Now, in the, you mentioned a business plan, research and preparation of a sustainable destination Winchendon community development business plan. That would have all of these pieces as part of it.
That's accurate.
It would be like the final presentation of phase 2 would be that. Okay. Thank you. Questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Anderson?
I have a problem, and maybe there's a disconnect, but so many properties that you have listed are privately owned. And so are you asking, are we investing public taxpayer money in private property?
No, just the opposite. Some of these properties haven't paid their taxes. The quickest way to get them to pay their taxes is to hook them up with a legitimate.
But in order to hook them up, are we not sinking taxpayer money into a property that hasn't paid their taxes?
I don't know, Justin, maybe you want to take a cut at this, but I'm not getting, of course we have an investment in every property by service or other relationship. So I'm lost.
I can try to help. I can try to help a little bit. So there's a term that's frequently used. So as you're describing it, it sounds like a foreign concept.
Wait, what?
As you're presently framing this issue, it sounds like a foreign concept.
Foreign?
Foreign concept. And,
Okay.
But what you're describing is a public-private partnership, and it's one of the main tenets of economic development, and it's exceedingly common for a municipality to make an investment that will yield or encourage tax growth, so it will pay for itself in the long run. So in a nightmare scenario, well, I'll give you an example of something that I don't stand behind, for example, is if a major league sports team holds a city hostage and says, pay for our new stadium or we're going to leave, right? That's like the nightmare scenario on that other end. The good end, or where it's productive, is something like the MassWorks program that the Commonwealth has, that encourages public-private partnership, where you can go out and seek out a grant up to $2.5 million. They've actually raised the cap recently. And if you can identify a privately owned parcel, the Commonwealth will give the municipality $2.5 million for infrastructure upgrades. So if you say that, that green building down the road has a lot of upside, there's a lot of potential there, but it would be too heavy of a lift financially to get it off the ground if there wasn't some help on the public side of improving the water sewer, for example. It's just not feasible. That little bit of public money helps incentivize a much larger private investment that will result in tax revenue over the years that is going to far exceed that small upfront investment that you made. So if you have something, for example, like the White's Mills, that we currently value at something like $1 million, that's a huge complex. If you had that thing back online in terms of its highest and best use, and you had it some type of mixed-use, residential, commercial, and you are taxing it at its full value, at its highest and best use every year, that could be a six-figure increase in 1 year in terms of new growth that you would be bringing in, that complex would be paying, taking that burden off the shoulders of just a normal single-family taxpayer. And so that's what we're talking about. So, you can frame it as one way of saying, oh, are we giving privately owned parcels public money? Well, I mean, that's one way to say it. Or you could say, are we incentivizing private growth by using, or incentivizing using public dollars in a modest amount?
Let me ask it this way.
Sure.
Are we picking winners or losers out of property owners in town?
Well, I don't particularly, I wouldn't answer that question, but I think the chair has touched on it, and the answer is no, we're not. And I think there's been a deliberate effort to broaden this conversation. So I think it's easy for me, like that green building, I literally see it from my office. When I'm looking out the window, and I'm looking down there and saying, my God, we're spinning our tires on White's Mills, but there's this immediately walkable to downtown giant sitting right in the shadows of downtown, and it's just going to sit there. It'll sit there for another 20 years if we don't do anything, I guarantee it. If the town doesn't take a proactive stance doing something like this, those buildings are going to sit there and rot into the ground. They will never generate an income. And I think when we look at, in terms of the long-term view of the town financially, and we're looking at things like, our 5-year projections, and we were talking about the need for growth, that the expenses that this town is going to see year over year projected over the next 5 years, the only way you're going to get out of that debacle is growth. And so the town is actually in a really good position, because for a lot of communities, growth is talking about getting rid of parks, cutting down a bunch of forest land, or paving over prime agricultural land. We don't have to do any of that here, because we have such a glut of underutilized former industrial assets that can be used for modern day applications. There's a real opportunity there to grow in this community in a way that's not going to impact your small town feel, in a way that's not going to harm your rural character. You have a real opportunity here, but you need to be proactive. And so, being proactive, some may say you're picking losers and winners, and I think there's a way to do this where that could happen. You need to be very careful. I agree with that concern. But I think there's been a lot of effort, like I said, to broaden this conversation, to bring people, everybody to the table and say, hey, is there somebody on this list right now that's listening to this that has a property that fits this description, but we haven't listed it? Come see us. Come talk to us about it, because we want to help everybody equally as much as we can. But ultimately, it's going to help the town in the long run. I hope that answers your question. The short answer is, the short answer is, if you did this the wrong way, you are picking winners and losers. If you do it the right way, you're making an investment in your community. But if you do nothing, nothing's going to change. You'll be right where you were 10, 20 years from now.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Picking winners and losers is certainly nothing that I'm looking to do. I look at a structure or a building or something, and it's clear to the eye whether it's a winner or loser just by what is it being used. And I hate the term loser, so I'm not going to say it again. But phase 2 would be that investor prospectus. We would have developers, equity partners, et cetera, looking at what we've identified.
Could you define equity partners for me? Maybe there's a disconnect in my head.
Yes, please.
Just investors, people that want to spend money to make money. In fact, a big segment of the grants we're applying for
Mr.
require
Samus?
public and private
closer.
collaboration to be up.
A little closer.
Sorry. A big segment of those grants require public-private collaboration. But on equity partners, it's investment. It's investment of cash.
But again, grants are taxpayer money, correct?
Taxpayer money is always involved because you've got
I'm
infrastructure.
just
Yeah,
want
you've
to
got
be
it,
very
though.
clear in what I'm doing in my head so that I know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, a state grant comes from state money, which is taxpayer money.
That's taxpayer money.
Yeah,
Well,
agreed.
I just want to clarify a point on that, if I could, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Because you hear that come up a lot, too, is we get a grant and people say, well, that's still taxpayer money. Well, yes, it is. But that money is going to exist one way or another, and it's going to get doled out to another community. It doesn't go away. So, yes, it's taxpayer money. Yes, we all pay into it. And I think we demonstrated a lot over the past 2 years in town about changing the culture of how we approach grants. And we're well over the $5 million mark at this point as we're rounding out the fiscal year. And we did that by investing a little bit of money up front. I remember when I first got to town, my first day, it was May 17th, 2021. It was the annual town meeting, and you were all voting on whether or not to put up $30,000 or $40,000 in seed money to help us get grants. And Selectwoman LaPointe, I think you were in the audience because you weren't seated yet. And you stood up and asked the question, well, let me ask the incoming town manager, why would we spend money in this way? Like, do you think this will result in grants? And I assured you at the time, absolutely, because you want to pay for designs up front, so you have them ready. It's going to help your grant application package, and you will see more grant funding come in. And here we are 2 years later. And we've entirely shifted the ways as a community that you approach how you go and pursue grants, and your success rate is absolutely through the roof. And so even with that said, people still say, well, yeah, grant money is taxpayer money. Well, you could just go and not get those grants, and you could let everyone else get it. But that money doesn't go away. They're still going to tax you.
It's the investment of grant money in private property that I struggle with. That I would be more curious to see what the people in town think, knowing that investment is going into private property. Would they get an investment in the back? Would they get a return on investment? I don't know, but what is their thoughts on it.
That's a fair point, but like the MassWorks grant, for example, and I keep bringing that up because that's the marquee one for public-private partnership for economic development. You could land a big one here in Winchendon. I could list 5 spots right now where you could get one easily within the next year. If we had some type of private entity come forward that has the ability and the know-how to link these things together. But even if Winchendon doesn't get it, Fitchburg is going to get it, Gardner is going to get it, Leominster is going to get it. Everyone else is going to get it, whether it's invested here or not. So you may as well have one that's invested in Winchendon. I don't see why you would cut off your nose to spite your face there.
Go ahead.
I think you're missing my point entirely.
I may be. Would you like to re-articulate it?
Where else would you invest in?
In public, if that was town-owned land, then that's investing in ourselves. But when people see that we're investing in a private property or helping them to promote their property so that they can gain a profit, people might have a problem with that.
Question I have, I'm sorry.
Come up to the mic, please.
So one of the questions I have when I think about the town's economic development is if something in this, I'm not advocating for this, I'm trying to sort things out. If this isn't the answer, then what is? And where are these public properties that we can invest in to get this kind of interest in economic development and new life, new revenue stream? Because I was a little alarmed to hear as I've been listening to different things. And I remember seeing Keith Hickey's graphs from a long time ago on how the financial situation of the town is going to be changing. And we're going to be in a problem. And we need to have to figure out a way how to increase the revenue base of this town. And so that's why I'm just curious about where are we going to get our economic development from? How are we going to do it? Where's the resources going to come to put into it? We don't have them in town, so we're going to have to go outside of town to get them.
Right.
And where are the public buildings and spaces that we have to invest in? Because when I look around, I don't see them. Maybe I'm missing something. So I'm just kind of lost at where we're going to go and what we're going to do with this. And the reality is that these kinds of investments, I get what you're saying, that people, the job, part of the job is, I think, Barbara, is to help people understand, you know, the pluses and minuses of this. And for me, it's like, so what are our options if we don't start to develop private-public partnerships with people who have the means, who can help make this happen? Because I don't know where those other resources are in our town.
Well, I think that maybe has there been a survey that's gone out and to ask people what they think about this?
So we've been soliciting people to participate in the
in this particular phase one. Have we sent out a survey? I would feel much better about it had I had some feedback from people who aren't involved in the master plan committee or.
Okay.
So I agree with you, and I see no harm in that. But I do want to stress that we've, like many other topics in town, have been begging people to participate in this process. We've been putting it out. We've been advertising. Jane, bless her heart, was the only person to volunteer to join the committee.
I'll be honest, but it's time-consuming where a survey is not.
Sure. But what I'm saying is it's not for lack of effort, and maybe a survey can be incorporated. But I just want to stress again, the grant programs that I'm referencing, MassWorks, Mass Development, anything that's involving economic development is specifically geared towards private investment. There is no public asset that we could support by getting one of those grants. You won't get it. It has to be a public-private partnership. And so you can say you just don't like that and you're not going to play the game and take your ball and go home, or you can go out there and give it your best shot and try to bring in money to support these businesses. Because if you get these businesses back on their feet in this town, a lot of them can't do it by themselves. That's why they're still sitting there. That's why the old MyLike building is sitting there and just falling into the ground. They cannot do it by themselves. The market will not allow for it to happen. So if there's an opportunity for the town to go out there and be proactive and try to get a grant to try to get these properties back on their feet, you have an opportunity to bring in additional tax revenue. If you do nothing, nothing will change. And like Jane had referenced, Keith Hickey's projections, my own projections over the past 2 years, you are going for a hole. You're going for a hole. And the only way out of it is if you grow and if you get some of these properties back online. And if that means kind of pinching your nose and taking some of that grant money for a public-private partnership, and sometimes you need to kind of eat your peas. It's the way it works.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Lapointe,
I think
and then Brian.
Mr. Solzback got to the point that I was going to ask or make for clarification. I think when you hear, that it would be going toward private properties, it's not like a single-family dwelling. It's a commercial or a mixed use where the town's then going to be getting revenue from a meals tax or a sales tax or a lodging tax or something like that, where we're making money eventually on. It's not just like a residence where the money's going to go away.
Correct. Mr. Croto.
So last month, we did put in a MassWorks grant. We put the MassWorks grant in for Beach Street. Our private public partnership is Bull Spit Brewing. So we're not only trying to better Beach Street, which we've gone out, we've paid out of pocket, we've designed, we know what the costs are. We want to bring new roads, new water, revitalized sewer to that location, but it's also upgrading the neighborhood around it. So it's not just benefiting Bull Spit, it's benefiting those 25 houses that are there now. On the application, they asked if the town had any money to contribute. I put 0 because we don't have any money that was approved at town budget. So what's nice about MassWorks is I put the grant in for 1.9 million, and MassWorks could come back to us and say, well, we're going to give you 1.5, either make that work or go back to the town for the 400,000. So it's not like the town's not currently trying. We just look at it in a different nature, but this wouldn't be possible without that $40,000 a year of seed money, because that's what keeps our ball in play, if that makes sense.
If I could, you'll see in the scope that each of the projects that we will be bringing back to you will have a projected bottom line, ROI. You'll see it in all the working papers.
Thank you. Anything further on Phase 2? Questions, comments? It's a funding source for the proposed. I know Mrs. Blanchard mentioned, she had concern about with all the other expenses that we're facing. Where could we possibly project finding the $18,000 for Phase 2?
So there are some monies available in ARPA. And I think just for the sake of scale, because I know that sometimes we talk about numbers and they sound a little scarier than they are, or it seems like a bigger chunk of money. And don't get me wrong, I'd love to trip over $18,000 right now personally. But for an organization of our scale, multi-million-dollar, I think we're a $34 million organization, it's not unusual for us we recently spent $25,000 for a second water study, for example. And so I think that sometimes helps reframe that cost, is that I know it can seem alarming up front. But ARPA, which is geared towards initially infrastructure investments, but later on economic development pursuits, that would be a good use of money. It's federal money, so it's not coming out of people's direct tax bills, your real estate tax. It's not coming out of town coffers. It's money, it's coming back from the feds. I think that might be the in so many words, least offensive funding source, if that helps.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that says it all.
Thank you. Anything further from the board? No? Okay. Is there an interest in someone making a motion to move forward with Phase 2?
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Phase 2 is 18 or Phase 1 was 18? Because I thought I saw that for Phase
Both.
1. Oh, both.
Yes. I will move that we move forward with Phase 2 of the Destination Winchendon project as presented this evening.
I'll second it.
Rick, are you picking this up?
Yes, I am.
Okay. We do have a motion, it's been made and seconded, to approve Phase 2. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, because Mr. Ward is remote. Mrs. Blanchard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
No, not at this time.
And Chair will vote aye. All right, thank you very much. So if you would work with Mr. Solzbach's office to, whatever needs to be done to get that, and we'll plan on seeing you soon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you this evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Selectman.
Thank you. All right.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Solzbach.
would you entertain taking 4.3 out of order? Sorry, we're all over the map tonight.
So moved.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out, will there be some committee put together now to try to work with them, or is this going to be ad hoc the way it was?
We will make every attempt to get a committee together now that we know that it's moving to the second phase. Yeah. Thank you.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, 4.1, made, and I will second. So the motion is to take 4.1 out of order.
4.3,
Beg
excuse
your
me.
pardon, 4.3. Roll call vote, Mrs. Blanchard,
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe,
Aye.
Mr. Ward,
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We're on 4.3, the Mass Trails Grant Award. Mr. Solzbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a moment to recognize that our team has successfully secured a $466,840,000 grant through the Mass Trails Program. This was a years-long process that included town meeting votes, coordination with the redevelopment authority, engineers, and abutters. And there's a couple people that I specifically wanted to call out. We're joined this evening by Mr. Lionel Cloutier, if you'd like to come up and join us at the table. When I first got to town in 2021, and I did not know Mr. Cloutier at the time, he came forward to my office, and I just want to highlight that he has been a consistent advocate for his neighborhood. And I just wanted to state that I appreciate his persistence in the matter. And Lionel can be persistent, if anybody knows him. But I wasn't the first town manager he had come forward to, and I understand there's always different priorities and availability of funding for these projects. And Mr. Cloutier's biggest issue was that in his neighborhood along Webster Street, there was an industrial parcel that had, by his own description, visible coal dust matted into the trail. And he actually finally convinced me one day to go out and walk it with him. And sure enough, you can drag your shoe out there, and there's about a ½ inch to an inch of just visible coal dust right in the heart of downtown Winchendon, on trails the kids cut through and ride bikes on. And so as part of that process, the second thank you that I'd like to issue is to Mr. Brian Croto, who, after reviewing this with engineers and going through the process, he was the one who ultimately prepared and submitted the application to the state. And so we just got awarded this, but Brian's hard work and dedication to the community is appreciated. And I just want to stress that it's not typical for a DPW director to go above and beyond in that way. And I think it just further highlights what we've been talking about in terms of the culture we've cultivated here in Town Hall, that it's not just one person going out and getting grants, it's really, it's the entire Town Hall. Really great work, Brian. Also, while we're here, if Rick is still on the phone, because I'm just handing out thank yous, Vice Chair Ward as well also had a really big part in this. Was a strong advocate. There's an interstate cycling group up in New Hampshire that's been trying painstakingly to connect the New Hampshire network to the Massachusetts network to carry things actually from, I believe, Brattleboro, Vermont, through New Hampshire and down to us, straight through to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail to where I am in Lowell, and then down into Boston. So it's really a neat initiative. And a special thanks to Rick for participating in those meetings, as well as our planning coordinator, Nicole Roberts. So lots of thanks to go around, but just real quick for Lionel, thank you for that. And would you like to tell everybody, maybe I'll pull up on a map here, you want to kind of describe the area and how you came to be familiar with it?
Well, the area's been loaded with coal for years. The town bought it in 1986. And they bought it for the principle of keeping a developer from building houses on it because they knew it wasn't safe. It needed a lot of work. But my idea was to complete the bike path up to Jackson Avenue from across Central Street. Then we could break off into two lines, one going Cheshire up through Fitzwilliam, into Keene, which Fitzwilliam is waiting. It's already done. And the other one was to break off and go to Jaffrey, Rindge, New Hampshire. Mainly Rindge because that line could take the elderly with their scooters shopping on their own. It's only 2.5 miles. They could take a scooter on a full charge, go shopping, and come back home. Right now, they have to rely on a senior busing, and they're only allowed 3 bags to bring back home with them. That's not very much groceries. So that's why I pushed and I talked to Justin about getting that line open. And I'm very thankful to Brian for writing the grant, and hopefully we continue to get grant money to continue and finish the lines. So we do have a complete trail. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lionel.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the agenda. 2.1 entertainment permit for the Recreation Department for Ice Cream Sunday, August 27th, 1 p.m. at the Winchester Community.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Did we forget the appointment of Dylan Romanowski?
1.2.
Did I? I did. I apologize. I did not see that. Okay. 1.2, Parks and Recreation Committee appointment, Dylan Romanowski. It would be a 3-year term ending in 6/30/2026. Parks and Recs voted yes, they would like to have him join.
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Anderson.
I would like to make a motion to appoint Dylan Romanowski to a 3-year term on Parks and Rec. For the term ending 6/30/2026.
Thank you. Seconded by Mrs. Lapointe. All in favor say aye.
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 Roll call.
Oh, thank you. Mrs. Blanchard?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mr. Ward? Rick, are you there?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye, and I would like to thank Dylan for all the years of service he's already put in.
Chair votes aye, yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, 2.1 for an ice cream sundae. No issues from department heads. This would be on Sunday, August 27th at 1 p.m. at the Winchendon Community Park. Thank you. Questions, comments from the board? Or from Ms. Newton?
So this is kind of a culmination of a longer-term event that we're working in conjunction with our local ice cream and frozen treat shops, where every Sunday in August, people who are participating by purchasing a small punch card can go on Sundays to any of the participating locations and get a discounted ice cream. And then the last Sunday in August, we'll be having an ice cream themed event at the community park in conjunction with one of the Winchendon Music Festival events that we already have come to you for. And at that time, they can receive a free sundae from the Recreation Department along with other ice cream themed activities.
Very good, thank you. Questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Blanchard?
Can I ask what ice cream?
The hard questions.
As of
Gonna be
right
local.
now, the farm has confirmed their participation. We are still. we've
Murdoch
reached-
Farm?
Yeah, Murdoch Farm. And we've reached out to Lickety Splits as well as the PJ Slush Shop. And we're working with them, and our committee is considering expanding it to other towns to try and make about 5 locations that you could visit. But we haven't quite identified what the other ones will be just yet. I'm sorry. I know that Lickety Splits, while we haven't worked on confirming their participation in the punch card part of it, they have entertained the idea of possibly working with us for the ice cream for our free Sundays on the last day.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing in the board, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Lapointe,
I would make a motion to approve the entertainment permit for ice cream at Winchendon Community Park on Sunday, August 27th at 1 p.m.
Second.
thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, Mrs. Blanchard,
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe,
Aye.
Mr. Ward,
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson.
Aye.
Chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have an entertainment permit from the Beals Memorial Library for public shows on the library lawn, June 29th, August 3rd, August 10th, August 17th, and August 24th. No issues from department heads, questions, comments from the board? And this would be 2 to 4, okay, various times, depending on the activity, but those are the dates. If there's no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson,
I'd make a motion to approve the entertainment permit for Beals Library for their public shows on the 6/29, 8/3, 8/10, 8/17, and 8/24.
Second.
thank you. Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mrs. Anderson,
Aye.
Mr. Ward,
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe,
Aye.
Mrs. Blanchard.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you. Next up, we have a lodging license issue. Is there any further update on this, Mrs. Calandrella, sorry.
We've reached out to, and we've received notification from the Greenfield Group that they're working in conjunction with Camelot Court and their owners. They did just bring up their past due water bill of $2,500 current. The gentleman will be working on paying their past due taxes, so at this point, we're recommending that we just renew until September 30th. Still taking in increments.
Thank you. So they did bring the water bill current.
Yes,
All
and
right.
since our last meeting, they've paid $2,000 towards their back taxes.
That's good to hear. Thank you very much that there's some movement on that. Questions, comments from the board?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, this is a bugger. It
Yeah.
just bothers me that they're not keeping up with their taxes and so on. But I also look at the other side, I can't see putting these people out. So I guess I'd support 3-month extension.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at least we are making progress. They've paid $2,000
Right.
towards the taxes, and they brought the water bill current, so. Is that a motion, Mr. Ward?
Yes, I make a motion to extend the lodging license to expire on September 30th, 2023 for Camelot Farms.
Second.
Made and seconded to extend. Any further discussion?
No, but I would like to
Yes.
reiterate, it's getting old.
Yeah, agreed. Point taken. Mrs. Blanchard?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you. Notice of vacancies, it's in our Dropbox. I'm not going to go over it this evening. recognition of former Constable Frederick Cloutier. Mr. Solzback, would you care to speak to that?
I'm actually going to hand it off to Mary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I can speak on that. In reference to Town Clerk Wendy Stevens asked if we could just recognize our former constable. Fred is not seeking reappointment this year. He is retiring. His background Fred was first appointed in 1974 as constable, making it 49 years of service. Additionally, he was a police officer in Winchendon from 1966 to 2005, making it 39 years. And we would just like to thank him for his service as constable.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Fred. Moving on, 4.1, accept donations to Parks and Recs. Ms. Newton?
Hello. So we had some donations come in, not necessarily sponsorships. Fidelity gave us $600, and we had another donation that just wanted to remain anonymous. They didn't want recognition for their donation for another $500.
Thank you. So it's another $1,100 total.
Yes.
Questions, comments from the board? I will make a motion that we accept the donations as presented this evening.
A second.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mrs. Blanchard?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is one year-end transfer that we need to do this evening. We will have more at a July meeting. This is a request to transfer $7,072 from the IT tech salary account to the town manager executive assistant account. Reason for the transfer: to assist in covering a deficit in the executive assistant budget for Mrs. Daigle's retirement extension for her assistance in special projects. This has been approved by the Finance Committee. Questions, comments?
I think my only question is, how much longer do we expect to be over drawing on that particular line item?
Sure, and you're not the only one to wonder. So, and I can add a little bit to that if I could, Madam Chair.
Mr. Town Manager.
So there's actually an additional request as well, transferring 333 and 43 cents. Those are all in org, though one referenced for the part-time IT position is out of org, and so that's why it kind of went out of screen.
I'm sorry, back up and say that whole thing again.
Out of organization. So if it's I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, if it's something that's outside of your specific area, I guess you could say in the budget, it goes through a more formal process. But the end goal here is to go through to the official retirement date for Mrs. Daigle, which is, I believe, August 18th. And so there's an official date set where we're not going to be double drawing anymore. For folks watching at home that may be tuning in and wondering why, as we've expressed in previous meetings, Mrs. Daigle was working on closing out some special projects. She'd been in that role for 20 years. And so there were a lot of items we wanted her to close out. But in addition, as part of our annual audit and the management letter, there are some long-standing straggler, I would say, issues that she's been working on addressing as well, in terms of sorting out filing issues and catching up on updating various policies. But most recently, and I would say the bulk of the work that you're going to be seeing, is working on getting the cable studio up and running. And so we're actually right on the edge. I signed the paperwork today of securing a vendor who's going to be coming in and swapping that out this July, because I did actually hear that tonight there were some issues with the broadcasting as well. So as a reminder, what we're doing there, we're not putting a Band-Aid on the system. It's not a repair, it's a full replace. So that was an investment that folks had backed at a recent town meeting. But in addition, carrying through some of that work as a special project. Mrs. Daigle has been working on that. And the broadband access grant that we recently received in the past couple weeks is another item that Mrs. Daigle is spearheading. So she's certainly not twiddling her thumbs. She's earning the money, but we also wanted to make sure that we found a way to cover this, and we actually worked pretty hard to cover it in budget, because we had talked about in the past using ARPA funds to cover that extended stay, I guess you could call it, and instead we found a way by tightening the belt a little bit and piecing together some of these scraps at the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anything further on this item?
Madam Chair? We
Yes,
did have
Mary.
one that Fire Chief Smith was going to speak on, a transfer for overtime. I believe you brought it to the, if you wanted to speak on it.
Yeah, I know there was quite a few transfers that had gone to the finance committee. I didn't know if, I thought they were gonna be on tonight to be. I know there was quite a few more that went last time to the finance.
Yeah, so I think those, I apologize for the miscommunication if that's the case, but those ones are going to roll through in bulk. So we've been talking with the finance committee a little bit on that as well, and whether or not they wanted to entertain a meeting on the 27th, and they had expressed that they just want to kind of wrap it up once the fiscal year is definitively over, rather than going back and forth and back and forth. So they'll be meeting again in early July.
Right, no, I mean the ones that they approved at the last meeting.
Yeah, those are, I think once they approve like their last batch, they're all going to roll through to the selectmen in one shot.
Oh, okay, so it's kind of tabled here, but not.
Correct.
Okay.
But we appreciate you staying throughout the whole
Yeah.
meeting.
It was a brutal one too, yeah, it's,
Well, when is the July meeting, just out of curiosity?
July 10th.
Okay, I will not be able to, I don't believe, attend that one. So.
That's fine.
Thanks, Chief.
You coming?
He says he won't be here. That's okay. So we have this one before us. I make a motion that we approve the budget transfer as presented this evening.
Second. Oops, sorry.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mrs. Blanchard?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you very much. Town Manager's Report, Mr. Salzback.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple financial updates. Fiscal year 23 year end is ongoing, and the final year end transfers will be brought before the board at your July 10th meeting. Sorry again, Chief. We appreciate you. And then we officially hit our revenue targets for fiscal year 23 as projected. I know there was a little hand wringing around the time of our annual town meeting, and so the finance committee was happy to learn that as projected, we did hit our targets. On the personnel side of things, I'd like to note that following an extensive review process that included a 3-week advertising period, Mr. Brian Croto has been selected as the most qualified candidate for the newly created Director of DPW and Facilities role, and it is worth highlighting that he was the only candidate that had experience as a DPW head in Massachusetts, as well as the only candidate boasting a Massachusetts Certified Public Procurement Officer designation, MCPPO. So congratulations, Mr. Croto, very well earned. For project updates, staging is going to be installed on the old Murdoch early next week, weather permitting. It's been a little dicey with the rain. It's going up today? It's up today, it's already up. Paving work has started on Pleasant Street with some repairs and resetting of castings to occur over the coming weeks, so just be mindful of that. And soil remediation at 4 Summer Drive is ongoing. And then on the miscellaneous side of things, the amphitheater hosted its first official summer movie night, and there were roughly 100 folks in attendance, a good mix from people in town and out of town. And Top Gun Maverick will be showing starting at dusk this Thursday. Tickets are $5 each, and children 10 and under are free. And thank you for all involved who helped make the second annual food truck festival last weekend such a great success. And lastly, it's worth noting, this is my final meeting, so I just real quickly just wanted to express my gratitude to a handful of folks. Linda Daigle, Mary Calandrella, and Deb Dennis, my immediate staff. I really appreciate all the hard work you put in, and you know, there are days where you absolutely carry me, so thank you, and I appreciate it. It doesn't go unnoticed. The entire town hall staff, we have just a ton of rock stars in this building, so thank you. Our team members of the Council on Aging and Library, thank you for all the work and creative programming that they do for our youth and our aging population. The brave men and women that serve our police and fire departments, really the most excellent group I've ever worked with. In 2 years, 0 grievances, not a single grievance. That's like a record. I also want to thank our DPW, who are some of the hardest working folks I've ever encountered. There hasn't been an instance where somebody at the DPW complained or grumbled or balked at anything I requested ever, and I have made some like ridiculous and obnoxious requests, being a detail person, and they always just say yes, and they're always happy to do it, so I appreciate that. Our partners at the Winchendon Public Schools, under the leadership of Superintendent King, thank you to all of them for their partnership. Members of our volunteer boards and committees, as well as specifically this board, each and every one of you, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I know that we don't all always see eye to eye on every issue. But I appreciate that you volunteer and participate in this wonderful little democracy here in Winchendon. So thank you for your service. Also to Amy Salter and Chairman Barbaro as well, who are no longer on the board. I'm wrapping it up, don't worry. The civic groups, the nonprofits, and the businesses who continue to invest their resources in Winchendon, and of course, the people of Winchendon themselves, I thank you all with a very full heart. Thank you for the opportunity to serve you. Thank you.
And I would just like to say thank you for all that you've done for Winchendon. It's been a busy couple of years, and we've got the gas pedal jammed to the floor. So, thank you. Questions, comments to the town manager on his report?
Madam Chair?
Mrs. Lapointe?
You can go first.
Mr. Ward, go ahead.
Yes, I'm not going to be there probably when Justin leaves. So I would just like to thank him for bringing a vision to Winchendon of what we could be and having the energy and the momentum to keep it going forward. And I only hope that we can keep it going in the direction that he has set us on. I thank him for that.
Thank you.
I was just, well, now going to echo what he was saying. I think you've brought us and put us in a good place. So hopefully, to use your term, we can take that alley-oop and just keep going. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything further on the town manager's report? No. All right, we have one set of minutes. I'm a little confused why we have two. We have an amended and then a final draft in the...
I think the amended ones are the ones that had some corrections that were requested.
Okay.
Just to a couple of the wordage on making motions.
Okay.
So those, the amended one is the final.
So look at the amended draft.
Yes, please.
Okay, so these are minutes of our regular meeting of June 12th, 2023. I'll give you a moment to take a look at it, and then I'll entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Anderson?
I'll make a motion to approve the amended meeting minutes from June 12, 2023.
Second.
Thank you, made and seconded. Roll call vote, Mrs. Blanchard?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Next meeting is July 10th. We do have executive session this evening. Mass General Law 30A, Section 21A, Number 2, to discuss strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, subject to interim town manager, and we will reconvene in open session for the sole purpose of adjournment.
Do you want me to second that?
Yes,
Was that a motion?
it was. I move that we. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, Mrs. Blanchard?
Aye.
Mrs. Lapointe?
Aye.
Mr. Ward?
Aye.
Mrs. Anderson?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. I'm going to suggest we stay here since we
Yeah.
have Rick on the phone.
Can we do that?
Yes.
I think so. Everybody else.
Once everybody else leaves, yes. Thank you.
Everybody else